This long-haired dude, even with a gorgeous girl right next to him, he's got a very specific obsession, and it's for his 40-year-old professor. I mean, looking at her, who wouldn't? Even with a massive duel about to kick off, he totally ghosts his opponent. He straight up asks his teacher out on a dinner date. And let me drop a massive spoiler about how this plays out. Her only condition, he has to win the match. So he doesn't just completely wipe the floor with this guy. He literally slices the dude's vocal cords and shatters both of his legs. So why exactly is this kid so obsessed with older women and absolutely merciless to his classmates? Well, at first he was just bottom-tier trash, a total loser who got ruthlessly bullied hundreds of times. Even Frey Blake's own father couldn't stand having such a pathetic son cold-heartedly telling him to vanish from his life forever. Unable to handle that suffocating pressure, he decided to log out of life and return to the lobby. But right at that moment, Lucas Trauman completely hijacked his body. Now, Lucas wasn't just anybody. He was the most overpowered Archmage of his era, a ninth circle beast who could vaporize an entire army with a single spell. To put that insane scaling into perspective, only 10 mages in history ever reached the 8th circle. This absolute unit was at the 9th. But eventually, a demigod crashed his party, calling him a cocky mortal for daring to challenge the heavens, just because he reached the absolute peak of humanity. Then that deity locked him away with a ridiculously overpowered seal. He was left rotting in that endless void for 4,000 years. He was literally on the edge of losing his mind when Frey Blake's soul suddenly sparked into his consciousness. The kid was drowning in regret, begging for a taste of real power. That's exactly when Lucas claimed his physical form. He swore an oath to give Frey everything he ever wanted, and vowed to rain down pure hell on that demigod. He spends the entire night grinding out his training. And get this, on day 1, he instantly shoots up to the 5th rank. Of course, he had to purge a massive amount of toxic impurities from his system to pull that off. And just for reference, the actual principal of this academy is only at the 6th circle. Cut to the school courtyard where the local bullies are dapping each other up. Their leader smirks, bragging about how hyped he is to use Frey as a punching bag again. They even burst out laughing, hyping up the brutal beatdown they handed him last time. The heavy-set guy chimes in claiming he spotted Frey sneaking out of the infirmary yesterday with a massive handful of sleeping pills. They actually place a sick bet on whether he finally rage-quit life, with the leader scoffing that the loser wouldn't even have the guts to pull the plug. Meanwhile, Lucas has finished completely detoxing Frey's pathetic vessel. This kid clearly went through absolute agony, though obviously nothing compared to Lucas's eternal prison. Honestly, shouldn't he be checking into a hospital for a blood transfusion? Fast forward to the academy cafeteria, where everyone's jaws are on the floor. Frey is absolutely inhaling mountains of food, like it's his last meal. The students assume he's been starving for a week, but the crazy reality, he hasn't felt anything hit his stomach for 4 entire millennia. So here we are, a 4,000-year-old legendary mage is now stuck attending high school with a bunch of annoying brats. He needs to download the current world's meta before he can hunt down that demigod. Scene transitions to the classroom. The bullies are already chilling inside. The whole room dead stares at him, especially the alpha bully, who instantly yells out that he won the bet, since the loser is actually breathing. Without warning, the leader sticks his leg straight out to trip Frey, mockingly sneering that his favorite classmate has finally shown up to class. Obviously, they are anything but buddies, and a brutal public humiliation is about to drop. Out of nowhere, the heavy-set goon yanks Frey by the collar, demanding 10 meal vouchers to cover his lost bet. Frey just glares back, wondering who this absolute clown is smacking his head like he owns the place. Clearly, this trash wasn't friends with the original owner of the body. But suddenly, Frey's physical form starts shaking uncontrollably. Why the hell is he trembling like a leaf, just as the big guy winds up for a devastating punch? Bam Frey practically teleports right behind the giant bully, moving exactly like Goku. The entire classroom is left utterly paralyzed by his god-tier speed. Even the top-tier beauty of the academy is stunned. The bully is utterly clueless, and Lucas instantly connects the dots. This frail body is violently shivering, purely from the trauma. These scumbags are the exact reason the original boy gave up on his life. His dormant rage completely explodes. The hulking bully scrambles back up, swinging a massive hook straight for Frey's face. But Frey unleashes a raw shockwave of pure energy. Without even taking his damn hands out of his pockets, he sends the guy flying across the room. He smashed right through a pile of wooden chairs. Now the bully sat there gasping for air, face totally red, bruised up, and completely mind-blown. Frey had just wrecked him without uttering a single spell chant. The whole room immediately started buzzing with wild whispers. Everyone was saying Frey gave off a completely different vibe now, like he wasn't even the same guy. Realizing he had just flexed way too hard in front of a bunch of kids, Frey actually felt a little bit embarrassed. The entire class was absolutely frozen. He just awkwardly tried to slide back into the background. David was way too terrified to even speak, just staring wide-eyed from the sidelines. Nobody could process that the weak, pathetic Frey actually pulled that off. Meanwhile, the red-haired girl kept her eyes locked right on him. Suddenly, a loud voice demanded to know what was going on. Professor Dio had just walked in, only to find Jack completely knocked out cold. Professor Dio stepped up to check on him, instantly sensing traces of heavy mana still lingering around the kid's body. That discovery completely caught him off guard. He couldn't believe someone with that insane level of talent was hiding in this class. Scanning the room, he desperately tried to figure out which student actually did this. Once Dio hauled Jack to the infirmary and confirmed he was just knocked out, Professor Kevin stepped up to take over the lecture. The students nervously exchanged panicked looks with each other. As the class was finally about to start, Professor Kevin's creepy eyes quickly scanned all the girls in the room. Seeing they made up the massive majority, he instantly decided this was the... His gaze locked onto Isabel, who was quietly reading her textbook. But a split second later, somebody else caught his attention. Frey was sitting right there, completely lost in a book. One girl in the back whispered how much she absolutely despised this professor, calling him a total pig whenever he was around women. Kevin strolled right up to Frey, who stared back silently, sizing him up. It was honestly super weird to see the guy actually show up to class, since he practically ghosted every lecture. Frey wasn't exactly sure how to handle this dude. At first, Kevin thought he was just a hardcore nerd, before remembering the kid was always absent. Flashing a polite smile, Frey apologized, saying he had just been super tied up lately. The girls whispered about how pathetic he sounded, especially since his only real business was getting bullied every single time he showed his face. Trying to sound smart, the professor smirked and asked what on earth could possibly be more important than his lecture. Frey casually dodged it, saying he was just out there living up his youth. The girls literally had to hold back their laughter. Kevin just thought it was pure cringe. He wasn't really the type to act like his class was the center of the universe, but he still decided to press Frey, asking if he was actually studying properly. He wanted to test him right there on the spot. If Frey couldn't answer, he was going to make him pay for acting so cocky. The pop quiz started. First question. Name the 3 legendary items wielded by the magic warrior King Kassadin. Frey's eyes instantly narrowed. Instead of spitting out an answer, he asked the professor to repeat himself. He hadn't quite caught that name, but it sounded insanely familiar. Flashback to 4,000 years ago. There was this crazy, overpowered, fearless hero, packing mysterious powers that left everybody in absolute awe. He trained his martial arts with god-level focus. Just his raw aura alone could obliterate entire forests, triggering massive earthquakes and leaving a trail of destruction everywhere he went. The guy could literally reshape the ground beneath his feet, and he never even broke a sweat. One day, his buddy joked that if he didn't chill out, there literally wouldn't be any mountains left on the map. That friend chilling with a massive bag over his shoulder was none other than Lucas Trauman. It had been a minute since he last caught up with Kassadin. The vibes were peaceful that day, as Lucas just kicked back, watching his bro train like an absolute beast. Kassadin didn't even pause his workout for his guest. He just casually mentioned he brewed some tea, telling Lucas to go ahead and help himself. Taking a sip, Lucas randomly asked him if he ever actually thought about settling down and getting married. Kassadin totally froze for a second. Then he roasted Lucas, saying a nerd like him would never understand how a woman's heart actually works. Falling for a woman, he claimed, could shake a man down to his very core. Any dude with a weak mindset would instantly fold to the temptation. Kassadin hardcore believed that a true warrior had to stay completely rock solid around women. Yeah. That definitely wasn't how mages saw things. Lucas just stared blankly at his friend, while Kassadin silently glared right back at him. After a second, Lucas broke the tension, joking that he'd probably end up dating a literal rock if it was just pretty enough. The nostalgic memory hit Frey like a freight train, bringing real tears to his eyes. He suddenly realized that his old bro, the magic warrior King Cassidon, had somehow become an absolute legend after all these years. Professor Kevin was completely clueless about why this kid was suddenly tearing up. And the rest of the class, she wasn't just complaining about the difficulty. Isabel saw right through the professor's ego trip. He was totally just trying to humiliate Frey. Suddenly, a polite voice cut through the tension. She called him out flatly, stating the question had zero connection to magical history. The whole room gasped at her absolute savage confidence. Even Frey caught that vibe. She looked totally delicate, but she spoke with the iron grip of a battle-hardened soldier. The professor snapped his gaze toward her, his face instantly twisting into a scowl. She held her ground, arguing that Cassidon was a pure fighter, who only channeled mana to boost his physical training, meaning classifying him as a mage was totally bogus. She swallowed hard, bracing for the fallout. Kevin stomped up the lecture hall steps, looming right over her desk. He narrowed his eyes, asking if student Isabel was deliberately trash-talking everyone who walked the path of a magic swordsman. Rattled, she frantically shook her head, insisting she didn't mean it like that. Dead silence choked the classroom. Honestly, Frey felt disrespected too, remembering exactly how much Cassidon absolutely loathed being labeled a wizard. The professor let out this creepy, forced chuckle, sneering that this could turn into a very spicy debate. He forcefully clamped his hand down on her shoulder, ordering both of them to march down to his office. But Isabel violently shoved his hand off her. That absolutely blindsided him. He never expected a student to rebel right to his face, and Isabel was completely cornered with nowhere to run. Just as he was bullying her into taking the heat for Frey, someone else hijacked the conversation. The Tiger King's glove and the giant's belt. Those specific words made the professor freeze dead in his tracks. He slowly pivoted toward the voice. It was Frey, chill as ice, casually dropping the fact that Cassidon rocked exactly those 3 items. Frey was basically reminiscing out loud, talking like he and the legendary hero were just old drinking buddies. Then he paused, blinking innocently. Did I say something weird? The professor practically ground his teeth to dust, as he admitted the answer was spot on. Smirking, Frey flexed that there was zero chance he'd ever fumble a basic question like that. The rest of the class was completely weirded out by his new attitude. Humiliated Kevin snapped his focus back to Isabel, barking that her attitude was out of line. He snatched her wrist in an iron grip, demanding she follow him to his office, right now. She froze up in panic. Frey watched this creep cross the line, then smoothly interjected with an old quote from Cassidon himself. He casually dropped the proverb, losing your mind over a woman can shake a man straight to his core. Cassidon always preached that a true warrior stays rock solid around women. Otherwise, a weak-minded fool would just cave to his primal urges and become nothing but a filthy animal. The professor despised being cut off and totally missed the punchline, so he scoffed, spitting out that maybe Cassidon was full of trash. Frey just glanced down, eyeing the professor's stance as he stood heavily, planted on 2 feet. Suddenly, the insult clicked in Kevin's brain. Pure, unfiltered rage flushed his face. He screamed Frey's name, literally steaming from the sheer audacity of this kid calling him an animal. As Isabel stood there letting it sink in that Frey had just bailed her out, Professor Kevin locked all his murderous intent onto the student who got a little too cocky after getting 1 trivia question right. He snarled a brutal warning. If Frey bombed the rest of this pop quiz, he was going to make his life a living nightmare. Unbothered, Frey just stood there silently, daring him to bring it on. Cut to 10 minutes later. The professor was sweating bullets. The rest of the class was paralyzed, jaws literally dropping to the floor. Frey was speedrunning every single trick question. His deep-dive knowledge on the 4,000-year-old Age of Light wasn't just good, it was terrifyingly accurate. The second the bell rang, Frey completely checked out, pumped that it was finally lunchtime. He casually hollered at Professor Kevin, telling him thanks for the fun game, then asked if they were done yet because he was starving. Kevin's brain was utterly short-circuiting. How the hell did this trash-tier student know exact details from 4,000 years ago? Meanwhile, Frey kept a totally deadpan poker face. The professor practically choked on his own frustration, thick beads of sweat dripping down his face. Defeated, he finally dismissed the class and slumped at his desk, mentally spiraling over what just happened. Isabel was equally starstruck. Outside the academy gates, Frey strolled along totally vibing and humming a little tune. Suddenly Isabel piped up, asking if he was heading to the cafeteria. She had sneaked right up behind him. He completely ghosted her question. She was still giving him this tragic, pitying look. Annoyed, Frey just turned his back and pretended she didn't exist, but she just kept tagging along like a lost puppy. They ended up doing this awkward tandem walk until Frey finally snapped. He spun around, bluntly demanding to know why she was stalking him. Plus, her super stiff, overly formal way of talking was seriously getting on his nerves. Brushing off the family drama, the student body swarmed the cafeteria for the midday rush. Isabel, meanwhile, sat there completely flabbergasted by the absolute mountain of food Frey was demolishing. He casually dropped that he hadn't had a bite in 4,000 years. Still, he totally brushed off any follow-up questions. Isabel awkwardly apologized for trailing him, admitting she literally couldn't imagine sitting anywhere else. Then she hit him with the big question. How did he know so much about the Age of Light? The history books claim that legendary era earned its title, straight from the blinding power of the four great masters. Chewing thoughtfully, Frey's interest peaked. It dawned on him that after 4 millennia, magic hadn't evolved one bit. If anything, it had massively downgraded. He couldn't help but wonder if the demigod was pulling the strings behind this decline. Across the table, the girl nibbled her food in dead silence, as he casually listed off the big four Kasajin, the magic warrior, Schweitzer, Wilseman, the sage Iris Fistfounder, the dark witch and peace founder, and finally, Lucas Trauman. Her eyes totally lit up at Lucas's name, gushing over how absolutely iconic he was. She even joked that if the legend was still alive, she'd straight up beg her mom for permission to marry him. Frey completely lost it, bursting into uncontrollable laughter. He couldn't fathom how someone so incredibly young was already planning her wedding. Amused and honestly a bit flattered, he let her down easy. All the while, the rest of the cafeteria was practically burning holes in them with their stares. The gossip was already spreading like wildfire that Isabel had been tailing him. After all, she was practically royalty here, ranked as the academy's second-best student, and even the campus bully was utterly obsessed with her. Right on cue, that exact meathead stomped into the room. Just hearing his name sent the surrounding students scattering like roaches. But while Frey and Isabel kept totally vibing, David aggressively hacked at a sausage, absolutely seething at the sight of them together. Completely oblivious, Isabel brought up Professor Kevin's recent lecture. Frey didn't even pause his chewing as he broke down Schweizer's training trifecta: assimilation, development, and conflict. Leaning forward and slamming a hand on the table, she admitted she only knew the first two, begging him to mentor her on the conflict phase. Tearing off another chunk of bread, Frey casually asked for her current rank. Isabel had already hit the 3rd magic tier. That actually impressed the guy, considering how young she was to reach that milestone. She immediately called him out for sounding like a total boomer. Licking his plate spotlessly clean, he smirked and claimed he'd been around the block a few times. To her, though, they were still just a couple of teenagers, which meant she was ironically right and completely dead wrong all at once. Wiping out the absolute unit of a meal, Frey let out a satisfied sigh, finally full. He gathered his empty plates purposefully, dodging her desperate plea to teach her about the conflict method. He threw over his shoulder that his knowledge wasn't exactly textbook. It was pure, raw experience, so she'd be better off hitting the library. Basically, he'd be a garbage teacher for it. But hearing he had real-world battle experience left her completely shell-shocked. How on earth did a kid her age possess such insane magical depth as he walked off to clear his tray? She was left staring at his back, deeply questioning who this guy really was. Fast forward to later, the squad rolled into magic combat class. To keep the playing field leveled, everyone was hard-capped at Tier 1 spells. David was practically buzzing with violent excitement, his blood boiling seeing Frey casually stroll up to Isabel again. He was losing his mind trying to figure out why she kept giving the loser the time of day. Up front, the professor laid down the law. This was a live-fire exercise, so they better fight like their lives actually depended on it. Frey, however, was locked on to the instructor, Professor Louisa. He was absolutely mesmerized by her drop-dead gorgeous looks. Isabel elbowed him, whispering fiercely that drooling over a 40-year-old teacher was super weird. But he totally doubled down on his praise, boldly claiming she had the absolute peak female physique. Isabel just stood there, mind blown, that even his taste in women gave off insane grandpa energy. The very first matchup, David versus Frey. The two locked eyes in the arena, tension spiking. Frey strolled forward with a dangerously calm smirk. David sneered that he'd been dying for this, aggressively thrusting out a hand for a shake. Frey completely ghosted the handshake, turning his back instead. The vibe was entirely off. This definitely wasn't the pathetic punching bag David remembered torturing. Suddenly, the entire class gasped out loud as Frey smoothly wrapped an arm around Professor Louisa's waist, blatantly flirting with her. While she froze in utter shock, he purred at her not to sweat it. He might look like a kid, but mentally, he was way out of her age bracket. Without missing a beat, he asked her out for dinner tonight. Flustered Louisa shoved him away, barking at him to get back on the combat floor. That's when Frey dropped a wild bet. If he secured the win, she owed him that dinner date. The crowd thought he was completely delusional, considering he was stuck at Tier 1 magic, while David was a Tier 3 powerhouse. Supremely confident that he was about to get wrecked, Louisa locked in the bet. They officially had a deal. His words totally threw her off, sending a hot flush straight to her cheeks as she scrambled to pull herself together. There was zero reason her heart should be hammering like this over a student. Finally squaring up in the arena, David sneered, asking Frey if he had completely lost his damn mind. He kept pushing his buttons, convinced this whole tough guy act was just a cheap stunt to get the professor to call off the match. Pure venom burned in David's eyes. He kept running his mouth, but Frey just stood there, completely deadpan. David barked that he was going to rip out Frey's vocal cords and shatter every bone in his body. This was going to be the absolute last day Frey ever walked right. But Frey, he didn't even flinch. From what he remembered, basic first-tier spells couldn't even dish out that level of damage. Still, David was strutting around like he owned the place. The second Professor Louisa gave the signal, the battle popped off. Both guys dug their heels in. David immediately dropped his ultimate stone fury. Massive boulders ripped through the ground, merging into a colossal stone arrow right in midair. The crowd lost their minds, absolutely shocked that a student could even pull off a spell like that. Isabel was absolutely floored. Louisa literally just said only first-tier spells were allowed. But technically David hadn't broken a single rule. The red-haired girl snapped, demanding to know how a move like that was even legal. David bragged that it was a massive flex, only a direct heir of his bloodline could use, and then he triggered his vision magic. It was insanely overpowered, but a first-tier mage could still technically cast it. His high and mighty family treated vision magic like the ultimate status symbol, but this clown was just using it to bully people, locking those lethal stone arrows dead onto Frey. David smugly thought he had him shaking in his boots, but Frey just scoffed, brushing the threat off like it was nothing. Without missing a beat, he casually fired off a magic missile with one hand. The entire arena went dead silent, in pure shock, Isabel included. The raw, blinding aura of the spell lit up the whole room. David just laughed it off, completely convinced a basic magic missile couldn't even scratch his stone fury. He launched the massive arrow straight at Frey, but with one explosive impact, Frey obliterated every single rock, launching David across the arena at a terrifying speed. The sheer shockwave sent him flying through the air before he crashed into the dirt, tumbling like a broken rag doll. David literally started foaming at the mouth. The rest of the students were just standing there, utterly speechless. Even Professor Louisa was completely captivated by Frey's overwhelming power. His growth was downright insane. Meanwhile, David was writhing on the ground, shrieking in pure agony. His throat was completely wrecked, making it a truly gruesome scene to watch. Off to the side, one kid was still clutching a rock, totally frozen. They had all just shown up for a basic Class C practice match. Frey coldly stepped up, telling David he was a total embarrassment to his bloodline for desperately spamming vision magic in a simple duel. David desperately tried to talk trash back, but only pathetic drool slipped past his lips. Remembering David's cocky threat about ripping out his vocal cords, a dark, chilling smirk crept onto Frey's face. The glowing orb flared to life once more, ready to finish the bloody job. David had promised to crush his bones one by one, and Frey was more than happy to return the favor. Knowing he was absolutely screwed, David tried to beg for his life, but the words died in his throat because of the brutal damage. With a casual flick of his wrist, Frey blasted the orb right into David's leg, and the guy shrieked in pure agony, finally realizing he was completely doomed. Every single bone in his right leg shattered into a million pieces. Even then, Frey just kept stalking toward him, coldly, reminding the rich kid that this was his own grand plan. Isabel clamped her hands over her mouth, horrified that the violence was going way too far. Professor, Louisa snapped into action, screaming for the duel to end right that second, and officially crowning Frey the winner. But there was a catch: David never actually tapped out. Frey looked dead at the professor, reminding her that she literally told them to treat this like a real death match. And there are absolutely 0 timeouts on the battlefield. Isabel was completely baffled by the professor's twisted logic. Feeling totally powerless, she just dropped her gaze. Frey's eyes suddenly shifted color, radiating pure, unfiltered rage. David had always loved torturing the weak, but now he was the prey. Frey spat that scumbag mages like him were the exact reason this world had gone straight to hell. Honestly, for everyone's sake, he should probably never bust out that step-by-step magic again. Frey sauntered over, flashing a smirk. He claimed he was just messing around out of pure pity he wouldn't shatter every single bone in his body. He'd wrap things up right there. David bawled his eyes out, a brief wave of relief washing over him. But then Frey casually turned back around. "I never said I was finished," he whispered. David still had one perfectly good leg left, so a magic missile was going straight through that one too, as the glowing orb crackled back to life. Pure, unfiltered dread flooded David's eyes. The raw energy pulsing from Frey's hand just kept skyrocketing. David opened his mouth to scream, but nothing came out. Just dead silence. Way up in the stands, the crowd watched Frey's terrifying display of dominance in absolute shock. A blonde student locked his eyes on the massacre, taking mental notes before turning on his heel and vanishing. Somewhere else in the shadows, a duo quietly analyzed the wreckage below. Word of the slaughter spread through the academy like wildfire. The rumor mill was going crazy. Frey hadn't just beaten David in a duel, he completely obliterated him. He straight up wrecked the guy's vocal cords. Deep down, most students knew David was a total scumbag, and the campus was way better off without his toxic vibe. Still, their jaws were on the floor. How did the absolute laughingstock of the Blake family actually pull off a win? People were low-key convinced he'd sold his soul to a demon or something. Later, as Frey strolled down the hallway, some random upperclassman blocked his path. Frey had 0 clue who this guy was, so he dryly demanded a name. The dude puffed out his chest and introduced himself as Dauman Malost, a senior in his 4th year. Once Frey realized he was dealing with an upperclassman, he threw out a bare minimum introduction. The two locked eyes, tension thick in the air, before Dauman cut right to the chase, offering him a spot in the legendary Trauman rings. Hearing that exact name definitely flipped a switch in Frey's head. By now, he'd done his homework on them. It was an elite student faction, acting as the face of West Road Academy. You couldn't just walk in. They cherry-picked their inner circle with brutal standards. That glowing rune ring wrapped around Dauman's finger was proof he was the real deal. Frey, meanwhile, was mostly just annoyed, wondering if these kids, slapping his legendary past life name on their little club, was copyright infringement. He tuned out while the senior kept rambling. Before Dauman could even brag about being a big shot in the group, Frey just spun around. He literally couldn't care less about joining their squad. Suddenly, a smooth voice echoed from down the hall, joking that the freshman wouldn't be an easy sell. It was none other than Paran Jun, leaning casually against the wall. Dauman scrambled to respectfully greet his towering companion. The second that name dropped, Frey finally perked up. The newcomer stepped into the light, smoothly introducing himself as the actual head honcho of the faction. He quickly apologized for Dauman's aggressive vibe, defending that his buddy, despite being a total hothead, wasn't lying about the prestige of the rings. Frey just stared him down, absolutely silent. He started really sizing up the kid standing in front of him. Honestly, for someone this young, he carried an intense, commanding aura. Still, it was a hard pass for Frey. He brushed past them, casually tossing back that he wouldn't sue them for stealing his namesake. Dauman instantly raged at the sheer disrespect, but Paran just awkwardly scratched the back of his neck, telling him to chill out and drop it. The senior quickly backed down, apologizing for his outburst. Meanwhile, Paran's piercing blue eyes tracked Frey as he vanished down the corridor. Later that evening, guests started piling in. A massive feast was already laid out. However, the professor had explicitly promised to share a private dinner with Frey, but Isabel completely crashing their table. Total vibe killer. As they started eating, she casually waved a hand, telling them to just pretend. She was invisible. Completely fed up, Frey bluntly told her to get lost, but Isabel just shrugged it off, slickly bringing up the friction method, instantly hooking the professor's attention. Since Frey had been gatekeeping that technique, Isabel figured stalking him 24/7 was her best play. Hook the professor leaned in, asking if she was actually talking about the legendary Schweizer's training regimen. Isabel blinked, genuinely shocked that the teacher knew the ancient lore. She took a slow sip of her drink, admitting she'd only ever caught vague whispers about it from veteran warriors. She had dug through dusty archives a million times, turning up absolutely zero clues. But the second she realized Frey was hiding the real deal, she was obsessed. Frey just sat back quietly, sipping from his glass without dropping a single hint. Suddenly, Frey slid smoothly across the table. A gentle, unexpected touch made the professor jump. He glided right up behind her, wrapping an arm around her, and whispered that he could teach her something way more thrilling. But only if they took this little chat to his bedroom. The professor's heart raced, completely pulled in by his insane confidence. But reality hit, hard. This kid was only 20 years old. It felt like her brain and her body were entirely out of sync, fighting a losing battle. Right as their lips were about to meet, Isabel violently slammed her fist on the table, snapping at Frey to quit acting. So damn shameless in front of a teacher. Outside, a massive glowing moon hung over the balcony. Frey gazed out into the night, quietly reflecting on the chaos of his second life. If that demigod was actually pulling the strings of the world, he was still an absolute menace, even after 4,000 years. People still remembered Kassajin Schweizer Iris, and even him. That meant their legacy hadn't completely faded to dust, and people were still fighting the good fight. Isabel crept up quietly. He was totally lost in his own head, completely missing her. She just stared at him wide-eyed. A second later, Frey finally snapped out of it, locked eyes with her, and casually asked who was running the academy. But really, he wanted the tea on the absolute strongest person on campus out of the students. The professors, everyone. Before dropping names, she hit him with a pout, complaining he never answered her questions. He swore he'd spill, if she just told him who the top dog was. Hyped up, she did a little happy dance with her hands. She revealed the heaviest hitter among the students was Perron, while Professor Dio Persman and Professor Adelia ruled the faculty. But the ultimate boss, probably her aunt. Her aunt just so happened to be the headmaster of West Road Academy, Madame Cirrus Trisnine. Right then, Professor Louisa strolled up. She chimed in, explaining that Cirrus was a legendary 6-star mage with ice in her veins. Frey could feel the crushing weight of that tear. Theoretically, mages could hit the 9th star, but nobody had pulled that off in over 3,000 years. People were starting to think it was straight up impossible, swearing the true level cap was the 8th star. Less than 10 mages in history had ever grinded that far, making the 9th star basically a myth. Frey scanned the area, asking if the headmaster was the one who threw up the barrier protecting the academy. Professor Louisa wasn't entirely sure, but admitted it checked out. Frey instantly knew he wasn't geared up to clash with a 6-star mage yet. His mind flashed back to the offer from Troman Rings, and a bad vibe washed over him. Something was definitely off. He made the call he had to meet Cirrus Trisnine face to face. He spun toward his new friend and called her name. His face, completely softened, bracing for the massive favor he was about to drop. Dragging an innocent kid into this mess might just backfire horribly. His main quest, hitting at least the 7th star. The professor straight up told him that grind would take 10 years, even if he speed ran it. He just smirked, declaring he'd hit that tier before summer break was over. Louisa chuckled, teasing him about having wild dreams, but he was dead serious about every single word. Seeing the professor flying solo, he slid over and tried shooting his shot again. Isabel, visibly annoyed, snapped that she was still standing right there. She warned him that, if her aunt caught a professor messing around with a student, it would be game over for them. That completely killed his vibe. This was exactly why he couldn't stand dealing with kids. Professor Louisa agreed and dipped, leaving Isabel absolutely fuming. Streetlights cut through the dark. Frey knew there was zero need to rush this. He just had to play it smart and dodge any screw-ups. Staring up at the moon, he locked in the fastest route forward. Fast forward 2 weeks, and somebody came limping into the hall. David had crawled back to campus, hunting for Frey. He was still fully in denial, screaming that there was no shot a piece of trash like Frey actually clapped him. The entire hallway was echoing with his temper tantrum. Meanwhile, Frey was just chilling, casually flipping through his book. Face absolutely glowing red with rage, David swore he'd make him regret the day he was born. He vowed to turn Frey's life into a living nightmare. But before he could even finish his villain monologue, Frey casually blasted him with a magic missile, flattening him. David's crutches went flying as he slammed into the floor. The other students watched in absolute shock. Great, now his nose was busted too. Later on, in class, Professor Kevin casually mentioned David got sent home to get his face fixed. Bored out of his mind, Frey roamed the empty halls. He really thought the kids at the elite West Road Academy would at least fake having some class. If he wanted to master pulling mana straight from his core, he needed real combat experience. Suddenly a voice barked out, "Hey, gray-haired kid!" A guy walked up from behind, smirking about how he'd heard Frey was throwing around some flashy magic in a busted classroom. The dude introduced himself as Alex Dreamid, a cocky upperclassman, fully expecting Frey to bow down in awe. Not intimidated in the slightest, Alex bragged he could fold the scrawny kid standing right in front of him without breaking a sweat. Getting heated, he demanded to know what Frey did to David, claiming the guy was his little bro. Frey couldn't care less. He legit wondered if these absolute clowns were picking fights with him on purpose, just to flex their egos. The senior suddenly raised a hand, ready to strike Frey. They were nothing but a bunch of spoiled brats. Alex just kept yapping, demanding to know why Frey picked a fight with his buddy, while flexing that he placed 17th in the last Magic tournament. Frey just yawned. Fed up, the upperclassmen tried to intimidate him, growling that today was going to be his funeral. But to Frey, this was just another loudmouth bullying a freshman. Flexing for their squad, these dudes were just standing around playing spectator. Ganging up on a supposedly weak target seemed totally pointless, especially with Frey already charging up a magic missile. Boom, 3 students caught the blast, instantly sending Alex flying backward. Frey's raw power could literally wipe out an entire squad with one single shot. That completely set them off. Alex was out cold on the dirt. The rest whined about him pulling a cheap shot while they were mid-sentence. But to Frey, messing with these spoiled rich kids was pure entertainment. Their entitled whining just fueled his savage counterattacks. Golgarex, the golden boy of the Giard family, was desperate to crush him. The second son of the Pinalax clan jumped into the fray too. Frey didn't even flinch. He just raised his hands and blasted a second magic missile right at their faces. As the mob rushed him, he just kept stacking up energy, dropping them to the dirt, one by one like dominoes. Every casual flick of his wrist unleashed a devastating blast. By the end, he was casually chilling on top of a mountain of battered bodies. Total waste of time. He let out a loud scoff, realizing the thick clouds drifted over the academy. Frey had been grinding so hard to level up his techniques that he straight up passed out from burnout. Out of nowhere, a voice broke the silence, asking what he'd been up to lately. He spun around. It was Isabel. The whole student body had practically branded him the fatal missile, since he kept spamming that same spell to wreck everybody. The nickname made him cringe so hard, but honestly he just hadn't found a good reason to unleash his heavy hitter spells yet. Isabel caught herself feeling butterflies, just watching him crash at his desk. She couldn't tear her eyes away. Without even lifting his head off the wood, she confessed she actually took his advice. She already knew pure blood could boost magic circles, but mixing it with magic essence in a 7-to-3 ratio, that was a total game changer for her. And tossing half-troll blood into the mix would just make it insanely overpowered. Still, she gave him huge props for the wild discovery. After an awkward pause, she wondered out. Frey looked so insanely drained and dead inside that he just stared blankly right back at her. She locked eyes with him, practically dying to know what other crazy hacks he was hiding. He hadn't even realized he'd accidentally become her personal tutor. But since the girl actually had mad skills, he figured some proper coaching could easily push her to the 7th tier. He chewed on the idea for a second. Finally, he called her name and announced their next lesson, combat. Her face lit up instantly, totally hyped that it was actually happening. He dropped the news that he was ditching the academy over the break to train and offered to let her tag along to watch. But he gave her a strict warning. This trip would be brutal, maybe even fatal. She said yes before the words even left his mouth. She was obsessed with learning real combat. No matter how sketchy it got, she was locking in and going on this training arc with him. When departure day hit, she rolled up lugging this massive, overstuffed. Frey was low-key stunned by how much useless junk she managed to pack. But whatever, he just figured girls dragged around a bunch of mysterious stuff he'd never understand. Acting a little jumpy, she asked where exactly they were heading. Honestly, not even Frey had a solid game plan. He was heavily considering the Hispania Mountains. That zone was notoriously known as a monster paradise, and was next-level dangerous. Pulling out a map, they scoped out the fastest route doing the math on how long a boat ride would take. It would eat up about half a day, but the trek up into those mountains was an absolute nightmare, packed with hazards. Still, Isabel geared up without a single drop of sweat. She never signed up for an easy ride anyway. Frey just scowled at her weirdly confident vibe. Walking down the trail, they started chatting about teleportation stones for skipping the long-distance grind. Those gadgets definitely didn't exist 4,000 years ago. Magic had basically stagnated, but tech had gotten a massive upgrade. Still, warping across the map with a glowing rock sounded insane. The real catch was the price tag. A one-way ticket from Causifoni to Hispania was so insanely far, it would burn a hole in your pocket for about 10 gold coins. Frey dug into his pouch looking for cash, but only scraped up a single gold coin. Thankfully, he had a backup plan. Isabel was a blue blood noble, just like Frey Blake, so he politely checked to see how much gold she was packing. Plot twist, she brought literally zero. Her excuse, having cash makes people soft and lazy, so she ditched her wallet for this training arc, even claiming that hustling to fund the trip was basically a side quest for their training. Frey was absolutely speechless at how shameless she sounded while hauling around that mammoth backpack. Isabel nervously hoped he wouldn't connect the two things together. Yeah, the girls needed a ton of stuff. They pushed forward figuring they'd just wing it once they hit the harbor. Neither of them had ever hustled down by the docks before. The place was absolutely packed with salty sailors and gritty dock workers. They tilted their heads back, completely blown away by the massive wooden galleon towering over them. Rides were 100% free for Academy kids, which totally explained the massive swarm of students crowding the area. Plus, the food was hyped up to be absolutely top tier. She was literally drooling just thinking about it. But then, reality hit. The ship was totally booked up, and the next one wouldn't set sail for another 4 days. She just collapsed to the ground, absolutely convinced they were going to miss their deadline. Their only backup plan: the Titanic, a dusty, old-school glider ship. Still, they couldn't really complain. I mean, it is what it is. Even with a pit stop in Yotambul, it would hit Causifoni in less than 5 days. And Academy perks still meant a free ride. Down below decks, a shady crew was huddling up. A dude with a gnarly, scarred face smirked, saying everything was locked and loaded. The captain barked the order to set sail that very night for the ultimate raid. Another guy rocking an eye patch just chuckled. Someone asked why he gouged his own eye out, and he proudly bragged that it was the ultimate pirate flex. Huddled over a worn-out map, they started plotting like absolute menaces. Tapping a dead zone on the chart, one of them confirmed their prey, the ship making a pit stop in Yotambul. They'd jump it right after it cleared the Osqual archipelago. The only thing left to drop was the name of the target. It was the Titanic, packed to the brim with rich kids. Meanwhile, Frey and Isabel were chilling up at the bow of the ship. The captain rolled up, introducing himself and giving everyone a warm welcome aboard. Isabel totally matched his energy, chatting him up politely. If they hadn't snagged this ride, they'd be stranded for 4 more days. And honestly, the ship was pretty decent, even with so few passengers. The captain started spilling the tea on why they were cutting through Osqual Island, a notorious hotspot for pirate attacks. Isabel instantly low-key panicked, but he was super quick to chill her out. Sure, they only had 2 warships escorting them, but each one was packing a 4th-tier mage. Elite battlecasters straight out of the Magic Tower. So even if some pirate scum rolled up, they wouldn't even stand a chance. The twin mages kept their heavy-duty shield spells active. That definitely helped Isabel breathe a little easier. Honestly, if the pirates had even a single brain cell, they'd stay miles away. But then, Frey caught a super sketchy vibe. The crew suddenly went into absolute panic mode as the pirate fleet broke through the fog. A massive, heavily armed warship was charging straight for their throats. Even Captain Mac Martinez was completely paralyzed by the sight. Isabel watched the nightmare unfold in pure horror, while Frey stood there completely unfazed. The escort warships already blasted to the bottom of the ocean. That right there proved these weren't just your average thugs. They were rocking massive cannons and pure lethal intent. Just a few minutes prior, the pirates had locked onto their prey, watching the Titanic cruise right into their trap. Sure, the twin escorts were a slight annoyance, but these guys, they had a wild card. A VIP guest for this raid, chanting in some twisted ancient tongue, decided to flex his insane power. Enter Lord Dular, an actual lich, hard carrying this assault. His magic gave even the bloodthirsty pirates literal chills. He was just oozing pure, unfiltered darkness and destruction. But the captain trusted the guy. I mean, he was an undead monster, with a literal lich backing him up. The captain was convinced he was about to go down in pirate history. The undead boss started charging up his spell. Sickly dark energy swirled together with raw shadow magic. His opening move, Ice Spear. He blasted the warships, ripping clean through their reinforced hulls, just to snipe the head mages. Seeing the incoming nuke, the twin casters desperately scrambled to throw up shields. But it was way too late. The spears were just too insanely overpowered. They threw everything they had at it, but the freezing ice just shredded right through the ships, totally wiping them out. The pirate captain just cackled, already counting the fat stacks of loot they'd be hauling in tonight. His crew drew their blades, absolutely hyped for the bloodbath. As they closed in, the captain tried to hype up Dular's insane spellcasting. But then, the undead monster sensed a seriously weird vibe. When he slowly snapped his neck back around, even the cocky captain shuddered. Dular hissed that he had definitely fired 3 ice spears. So why the hell was that last ship still completely afloat? That's when it clicked for the captain he had specifically begged the lich not, since those VIP passengers were going to be their golden ticket for ransom. That just straight up pissed off the lich. He snapped, calling the captain a completely brain-dead brat. He growled that he was only using just enough firepower to cripple their escape and break their resistance not to send the ship to the bottom of the sea. The pirate captain still just stood there, looking totally clueless. Dular. He leaned in, whispering that the whole vibe of that ship felt completely off. Meanwhile, absolute panic exploded across the Titanic. Students were scrambling over the deck like ants, but off to the side, a shady cloaked figure just stood dead still, hidden under a hood. The guy looked completely drained, panting heavy. Frey and Isabel just froze, glued to their spots, totally clueless on their next move. Isabel was practically shaking out of her skin after watching those warships get totally wiped off the map. But Frey, his expression was ice cold. He gently patted her head. "Take a breath," he told her. "Right now we're just dealing with some basic pirates." His mind was on way bigger problems. He had spotted 3 massive ice spears earlier, but the one locked onto their ship just vanished into thin air. He hadn't cast a single defensive spell, so his brain immediately went into overdrive, trying to figure it out. He had felt that raw mana surge, but couldn't block it. Then a chilling sensation hit him, one that dragged up bitter memories of the demigod's agony. Pure rage flared up in his chest. He hated feeling this powerless to fight back. Shaking it off, he zeroed in on the aura. This wasn't a demigod. No, this twisted mana reeked of the undead. Still, that left the million-dollar question. Who shielded their ship? Tapping his chin, his mind raced through the possibilities. Whoever stepped up definitely earned some serious respect. Cut back to reality. The pirate galleon was closing in fast. The academy kids were totally losing it, sprinting around like headless chickens. The hulls smashed together. Boarding planks slammed down, and heavily armed raiders swarmed the deck while the crew screamed for backup. Zero combat experience meant pure hysteria. Passengers were trampling each other in absolute, unfiltered chaos. People were dropping left and right. But right in the middle of the carnage, the real showdown was officially on. The Titanic wasn't massive, but it was absolutely packed, holding around 40 rich kids from top-tier families. Calculating the massive ransom payout, the pirate captain flashed a greedy, twisted grin. He mocked a polite bow, loudly hyping up his crew as the most ruthless raiders on the seas. The ship's captain drew his blade, ready to throw down. But the raider chief didn't even see a threat. He just saw a floating piggy bank, stuffed with VIPs. The thugs erupted into nasty laughter. That massive disrespect had the whole deck boiling with rage. Suddenly, the captain caught a kid standing dead in his way. Just a scrawny student who looked like easy prey. The kid loudly declared that this boat was packed with elite magic prodigies. Basically, they had messed with the wrong crew. The captain instantly read his vibe as the student started charging up a defensive spell. Bam! Before the kid could even chant a word, something violently pinned him to the wooden mast. The captain had whipped a dagger straight at him. The student totally lost it. With the cold steel buried right next to his throat, he was vibrating with pure terror. Through all this madness, Frey and Isabel were just locked in place. Frey's sharp eyes caught it. That dagger was totally meant to be a fatal strike, but the blade actually curved mid-air, thrown off by the aura of that hooded guy. Was this mysterious dude the same hero who blocked those ice spears? A low, gravelly voice cut through the noise. The cloaked figure told the rookie he was way out of his league, warning him to shut his mouth, keep his head down, and play along. The pirate captain totally brushed off his missed shot as a slip of the wrist. The fake smiles vanished. Playtime was officially over. Smelling blood in the water, he decided to use this terrified kid to send a brutal message. The student scrambled backward in absolute panic. He was so incredibly traumatized, he literally wet himself on the spot. The captain relentlessly roasted him, calling him a crying infant. One of his grunts barked a laugh, tossed the kid over his shoulder like a sack of potatoes, and joked about giving him a little swim. "Drop him," the hooded stranger ordered. But the thug just smirked and chucked the boy straight into the freezing ocean. The student was frantically thrashing in the waves, screaming for a lifeline. But the brutal currents dragged him further and further into the dark water, until he was completely gone. Just like that, a second-year prodigy named Orca was wiped out without a second thought. And those savages, they couldn't care less. Driven by pure fury, the rest of the academy kids finally unleashed their spells. But the captain just rolled his eyes, complaining that these brats were too damn loud. Flashy spells rained down back to back. But then, an absolutely massive, overwhelming pressure slammed into them. A sickening undead energy flared up, wrapping around the raiders, and effortlessly tanking every single magical blast. The kids were completely frozen. They had zero clue how to counter this toxic darkness. The captain just stood there laughing his head off, letting this monstrous black magic surged, instantly overpowering the students. A terrifying, shadowy gravity started dragging every last one of them down into the void. One kid just stared his eyes wide with horror. This was textbook nightmare fuel. A freakishly powerful, legendary lich. Isabel was paralyzed by the sight of the monster. But Frey, his gears were spinning fast. These low-level thugs had literally made a pact with an immortal entity. But immortals don't negotiate with mortals unless they're playing them like pawns. And the pirates, they only cared about securing the bag. Greed was their absolute bottom line. Panicking, Isabel clung on to Frey, but he just groaned, telling her to let go because she was making him sweat even more. Then he caught a glimpse of her face and totally froze. Tears were streaming down her cheeks. It hit him right then, these definitely weren't your average cutthroats. That lich was packing at least tier 5 power, which explained exactly why the ship's mages were getting absolutely wrecked. The pirate captain whipped around to the shadowy figure, desperate for answers. The lich barked a bone-chilling order, demanding whoever blocked its strike to step right up. It knew exactly that the culprit was hiding somewhere on deck. When nobody peeped, the monster dropped a lethal ultimatum. Jagged ice arrows materialized right in its skeletal palm. The warning was clear: stay hidden, and everybody gets wiped out. The crew was paralyzed with absolute dread. Cackling like a total psychopath, it supercharged those ice shards, mutating them into massive deadly spikes. The captain frantically tried to pump the brakes on Lord Dular, reminding the monster that they actually needed breathing hostages to get paid. But the undead just shot him a death glare so chilling, even the hardened captain couldn't maintain eye contact. Right at that moment, a silent figure stepped out of the shadows. The guy's face was completely cloaked under a heavy hood, but the lich's radar was already pinging. This was definitely the interloper. Without skipping a single beat, the kid owned up to it. Deeply intrigued, the monster demanded a name. The second he tossed back that hood, the entire deck went dead silent. Jaws literally dropped. Even Isabel looked utterly shell-shocked. Frey, though, he just stood there looking completely unbothered by the whole thing. The mysterious hero dropped his name, Ander Herrera. Isabel instantly clocked him as a classmate from the academy. I mean, literally everyone knew who Ander was. The guy ran the most elite club on campus and was the golden child of one of the Empire's top 3 powerhouse families. Dude was an absolute academic weapon, constantly throwing down with Isabel for that #1 class rank. But flexing report cards was so not the vibe right now. She had to swallow her pride and admit the truth. Their test scores might match, but his raw power level totally eclipsed hers. The girls on deck were basically starstruck, seeing Ander in the flesh. A few of them even started cheering, genuinely convinced he was their golden ticket out of this mess. Isabel desperately prayed he could clutch this boss fight, but Frey ruthlessly popped her bubble, telling her to lower those expectations immediately. Crimson was already dripping from Ander's chin. The guy was running on fumes, barely keeping his feet planted. That lich was a massive tier 5 threat, and as incredibly hyped as Ander was, It looked like he had barely scraped into that power bracket himself. Honestly, just surviving a blast that outranked his own magic was a straight-up miracle. Sweating bullets, Isabel begged to know if Frey's stats were higher than the monster's, but he hit her with a flat, nope. He still shooed her away though, groaning about how he was still burning up and totally drained. Ander was mentally kicking himself for boarding this cursed vessel. He had deliberately picked the ship with the lowest student headcount to keep a low profile, and that backfired epically. He managed to parry the incoming nuke, but the sheer magical recoil left his bones feeling like pulverized glass. Staring down this nightmarish freak, his mind just went blank. He had absolutely zero win conditions here. The ghoul sneered, calling it a seriously lucky haul. It definitely didn't expect to farm such premium material today. A heavy, suffocating silence dropped as they locked eyes, accepting a brutal game over. Ander tightly squeezed his eyes shut, until a random voice shattered the tension, demanding to know the pirate captain's actual endgame. Flashing a completely smug grin, the captain brushed it off like it was just casual business, watching a massive payload of trust fund kids floating blindly through the lethal Oskal Islands. Yeah, they simply couldn't ignore a massive payday like that. So playing the ultimate good guys, they generously offered a safe escort straight to Causifoni. One of his lackeys chimed in, hyping up how busy the captain was. But the boss cut him off, making it crystal clear that this premium VIP protection required a massive payout first. Like always, it all boiled down to cold hard cash. Ander froze completely for a split second, before countering with a seriously bold pitch. He volunteered to be the solo hostage. The mighty Herrera bloodline could easily drop double whatever ransom these thugs were hoping to score. But the captain immediately shot him down, bragging that with an immortal superweapon backing his crew, he could basically write his own blank check. Ander just shrugged, giving credit where it was due. He flat out admitted he just didn't have the stats to solo their rented lich, but he promised to burn through every last drop of mana he had, swearing that if he went down, he was definitely taking someone with him. That fiery comeback completely caught the captain off guard. He was genuinely impressed, actively vibing with the kid's ruthless killer instinct at such a young age. He mused that the Empire's next generation was looking incredibly stacked. But the undead freak, it wasn't about to rethink its dinner plans. Ander's mana pool was absolutely insane, but all the color still drained from his face the second he clocked the monster's twisted motive. He desperately ducked and weaved through a barrage of void blasts, but the ghoul's strategy was terrifyingly clear. It was going to suck him totally dry of magic and hijack his corpse as a brand new puppet. A minion surged forward, pinning Ander down in a brutal vice-like grip. Negotiations were dead. The new agenda: drag everyone onto the pirate ship. Total chaos erupted as students scrambled in pure panic. But the crew wasn't having it. They violently rounded up the crowd, forcefully grabbing the girls and locking them in a tight hold. The pirates were eating it up, grinning like maniacs. That is, until a one-eyed scumbag suddenly remembered he was supposed to be bagging hostages too. His single eye locked onto Isabel. He stalked straight toward her, making her shrink back, hiding behind Frey's shadow. The raider scoffed, calling Frey a fragile little twig. Frey just glanced around, acting completely clueless about who the guy was even talking to. "Oh, you mean me?" The brute sneered again, spitting out the words, "Yeah, you scrawny little punk." Unbothered Frey smoothly demanded a little respect. That flipped a switch. The pirate's blood boiled, knuckles cracking as he geared up to beat the absolute life out of him. But Frey stood his ground stone cold. By this point, half the class was already hogtied and helpless. Jack muttered under his breath that Frey was letting his ego run wild. Fed up, the Corsair lunged, sword drawn and ready to slice. All eyes were glued to the scene. Surrounded by pure terror, Frey didn't flinch. The attacker closed in, winding up for a lethal strike. Isabel squeezed her eyes shut, terrified at the gore. But the only one getting totally wrecked and spitting out teeth was the pirate. Frey's raw power sent him soaring through the air. The heavy brute was swatted away like a piece of rotting garbage. Frey just casually glanced at his handiwork. A single devastating kick had launched the enemy straight into the freezing ocean, leaving the crowd absolutely speechless. Because the guy standing tall was Frey, the Academy's legendary, absolute loser. Ander was paralyzed, his brain short-circuiting as he tried to analyze whatever insane martial art that was. He replayed the tape in his head. A flawless mana-infused spinning hook kick that landed before the blade even dropped. He knew Frey had potential, sure, but this level of god-tier control, unheard of. Snapping back to reality, Frey gently blocked Isabel from stepping up, giving her a soft head pat. "Stay sharp," he warned. "Every single thug here is trash compared to you except that lich. So you can handle yourself just fine, right?" The mage flashed a shy smile, touching where his hand had been. Then her eyes went cold and focused, while Frey stepped up to the mob. One of the hostage-takers blinked, totally dumbfounded. What the hell just happened? Then he let out a cocky laugh, claiming his buddy only got dropped because he was busy drooling over a hot chick. In a literal heartbeat, Frey materialized right in his face, his speed actually tearing through the air. The pirate's brain couldn't even process the glitch-like movement. Lurking in the back, the lich watched in dead silence, analyzing Frey, totally caught off guard. Then, boom. Frey's aura erupted in a blinding shockwave. Still completely lost, the pirate let out a choked gasp of agony. Frey had landed a fatal strike, his voice dropping to a terrifying chill. "You guys really shouldn't have taken this job. I hate this setup and I'm officially done playing nice." For a split second it hit Frey he had never taken a life before. But honestly, he couldn't care less right now. While the entire deck stared in absolute horror, he knew scumbags like them were never going to vibe with a guy like him anyway. The entire crew swarmed Frey at once, but he just met them with a death glare. He grabbed the collapsing thug by the throat, hurling him like a bowling ball into two others. Without missing a beat, he unleashed a sweeping aura strike, completely wiping out the front line. One surviving rat tried to flank him for a cheap shot to the spine, but in the blink of an eye, Frey expanded his energy field, crushing him into the deck like an insect. The henchman next to the lich was hyperventilating, muttering that this was mathematically impossible. Meanwhile, Frey was just casually dropping bodies left and right. The students were frozen jaws on the floor, witnessing an insane gap in raw power. Desperate, one pirate snatched a girl as a meat shield, crying for mercy. But Frey dashed at him in an instant, moving so incredibly fast. He literally left after images trailing behind him. A savage high kick sailed right over the hostage's head, smashing squarely into the pirate's jaw. The rest of the mob tried to dogpile him, but he vaulted into the air, making them violently crash into each other. Pissed off, they screamed they'd drag his corpse to the bottom of the ocean. But the moment they looked up, Frey was hovering there, charging a massive, blinding sphere of raw energy. Pure panic set in as they started begging for their lives. Deadpan and silent, he just dropped the nuke on them. Their agonizing screams were the very last sound, and then nothing was left but drifting ash and charred scorch marks on the wood. Frey floated slowly back to the blood-stained deck. That's when he spotted a lone survivor. The thug had Isabel in a chokehold, screaming that Frey was an absolute monster. He threatened to snap her neck if Frey moved a single muscle. Frey just stared at him blankly for a second, and dryly asked, "Wait, what did you just say?" The bald raider blinked in total confusion, and before his brain could even process it, the mage was already glowing, fully charging up a lethal spell. She locked eyes with him, dead silent, and unleashed a massive, blinding surge of high-voltage lightning that completely swallowed them both whole. Just one blast was all it took to lay him out cold. The entire pirate crew froze dead silent. Completely dumbfounded, the lich and his pirate buddy stood there, jaws basically on the floor. Isabel and Frey locked eyes for a split second, before the redhead smirked, asking how he liked her combat skills. Frey deadpanned that she played the sweet innocent card way too well for someone that lethal. Suddenly, a slow, mocking clap echoed through the tension, making our boy whip around. It was the pirate boss standing next to the lich. He kept clapping, scoffing at Frey's power, though he grudgingly admitted he was totally impressed. Frey and the thug glared at each other, sizing one another up. Breaking the heavy silence, the bad guy pitched an offer. He pointed out that the gray-haired kid was clearly no average mage, but wiping out the entire ship solo would still be a massive headache. Frey stayed quiet, letting him run his mouth. The pirate smirked, claiming he only wanted half, just half of the magic students. Frey shot a sidelong glance at the hostages. One was bawling for his mom, while the rest were practically choking on their tears, begging to be spared. The villain pressed Frey to take the deal, hyping it up as a total win-win. Save a few lives, walk away in one piece. Frey just scoffed, asking how the hell that was a win-win, especially since he had already wiped out most of their crew. The pirate just shrugged it off, flashing a nasty grin. He told the gray-haired guy he had full VIP privileges to handpick who got to stay and who was getting tossed to the wolves. Right on cue, a blonde chick lunged forward, absolutely losing it as she begged him to pick her. She tried to throw herself at him, utterly desperate to survive. When dropping cash wasn't enough, she started offering alternative payments, promising she would do literally anything he asked. Another student hit his knees, bawling his eyes out. Within seconds, the rest of the mob swarmed in, screaming out dollar amounts to buy back their... Frey let out a heavy sigh, acting like his hands were tied, and casually told Isabel to start collecting the cash. Isabel completely snapped, yelling that he couldn't seriously be entertaining this garbage. Hearing her freak out, Frey flashed a smug little grin and joked about turning it into a live auction, which honestly just pissed her off even more. The pathetic crowd just kept crying, begging, and practically dogpiling him, while the pirates watched the absolute train wreck in silence. Having heard enough, Frey sharply asked if they were finally done. He shoved the clingy blonde away, grumbling that she was way too sticky and reeked of rotting fish. He glared at them, calling them absolute rats, spitting that the only magic they ever learned was throwing their daddy's cash around to get their way. They leached off their parents' hard-earned wealth, using it to step on everyone else, making them a total disgrace to the title of mage. A real wizard, he declared, is meant to shield the weak. A true wizard puts everyone else's lives above their own. And hearing that heroic speech, Isabel was totally swooning. Of course, he completely destroyed the epic vibe by demanding his payment again, making the redhead absolutely lose her mind with rage. Meanwhile, the bad guys were just chilling in the back. The pirate shot the Lich a weird look, wondering why the undead boss was being so suspiciously quiet. Was he actually doubting he could crush this kid? Reading his mind, the Lich coldly stated that no human was beyond his grasp. The red-haired pirate froze in absolute terror, realizing the monster just read his freaking mind, and quickly straightened his posture. The undead entity brushed it off, saying he was merely analyzing the situation. The pirate silently made a mental note to lock down his inner thoughts. The skeletal boss kept his empty sockets locked on Frey. He could sense a totally bizarre type of mana radiating from the kid, immediately recognizing him as a top-tier threat. But still, at the end of the day, the boy was just a 5-star mage. Figuring the human stood absolutely zero chance in a real fight, the Lich finally unleashed his dark aura, violently shredding his own robes. The pirate next to him started hyping up Lord Dular like a massive fanboy. Our heroes just braced themselves as the monster's unholy energy skyrocketed. The walking corpse boasted that he had slaughtered countless arrogant brats, just like him, commanding Frey to drop his weapons and become his loyal undead slave. Unfazed, Frey just sighed, telling the bony freak he talked way too much. Instantly triggered, the Lich fired off a nasty spell, manifesting glowing purple energy spears out of thin air. Isabel flinched at the terrifying magic, but before she could even scream a warning, the Lich launched the deadly barrage straight at the students. Our overpowered MC literally just sidestepped, letting the attack fly right past him, almost skewering the pirates behind him. But then, the purple spears aggressively hooked mid-air, boomeranging right back for a second strike. Isabel screamed at Frey not to let his guard down, warning him that the homing spell would lock onto him until he was dead. Yawning, Frey dodged again with zero effort, closely analyzing the magic and smirking that he had already figured out the monster's cheap little trick. Ander was sweating bullets. He knew that homing spell was bad news. Locked dead onto its target. And Dular wasn't even finished cooking. Right on cue, the Lich summoned skeletal hands, his dark aura instantly infecting the deck. Bony claws erupted out of nowhere from the floorboards. Frey kept dodging the heat-seeking blasts, but those creepy hands caught our boy lacking from behind. That pirate started hyping himself up like he already bagged the win, while Isabel softly whispered Frey's name. Then she flat-out screamed it as the Lich's magic triggered a massive chain reaction. The blast radius exploded, forcing Isabel to panic cast a shield to save her own skin. She threw a massive barrier over the crew, too. Everyone nearby scrambled like crazy to dodge the fiery fallout. The redhead kept that shield locked in until the smoke cleared, and her heart dropped. The main guy was completely gone. Nothing was left in the crater but splintered wood. She screamed out his name, desperately begging for a sign of life. Ander was already grieving, thinking they were totally cooked. But then out of nowhere, the Lich's deadly orbs literally froze in midair. The undead freak was absolutely shook. He whipped his head around, His very own homing missiles were now locked dead onto his own face. Panicking, he instantly threw up a repulse barrier to block his own attack, completely breaking his focus. That slip-up let Herrera break free from the dark magic pinning him down. But the boss didn't care. He just charged up another sinister blast in his palms and totally obliterated the leftover homing spheres. His undead brain was glitching out. How did some random kid pull a reverse Uno on his own spell? He seriously thought he had this in the bag, until Frey casually spawned right behind him. The whole crew was totally jaw-dropped, seeing Frey chilling there without a single scratch on him. The Lich spun around completely mind-blown, but no matter how fast he moved, Frey was practically teleporting to his blind spot. He was literally just using raw speed to troll the monster. Sweating bullets, the freaky boss launched himself into the sky to escape. The Lich was having a full-on meltdown, trying to process how this was even possible. Regular humans definitely do not move like that. But our hero just stared up at him, absolute god-tier confidence glowing in his eyes. Isabel hits him with a desperate, "Are you okay?" And he just shoots her this ice-cold look and gives the chillest little nod. She is completely starstruck, suddenly getting major flashbacks of a legendary mage who had that exact same vibe. The math was finally mathing, and it all clicked for her. Up in the sky, the villain started cooking up an absolute nuke of a spell, terrifying Herrera, who was stranded nearby. The Lich unleashed a downright apocalyptic shower of massive ice spears straight at the ship. The crew looked up in pure horror, totally convinced this was the end of the line. The Lich realized that wiping the ship off the map was his only way out, so he just kept raining absolute hell on them, totally fine with nuking everyone if he had to. But then something stopped him dead in his tracks. Every single strike got deflected like it was nothing. Frey had thrown up a colossal, impenetrable dome over the entire ship. The undead menace could only stare in shock, screaming that he was literally hacking. Ander was totally dumbfounded, agreeing that it made absolutely zero sense. He admitted he'd cough up a lung just trying to block a single spear. Meanwhile, Isabel was practically pulling her hair out, wondering who the heck Frey actually was. Floating above the monster called him a filthy casual, while spawning an iceberg the size of a skyscraper, getting ready to slam it right into the deck. Ander lost his mind, screaming that nobody could ever tank something that gigantic. Roaring for the humans to drop dead, the Lich chucked that massive glacier down like a literal meteor. But the main character, he literally launched himself off the deck, rocketing straight through the colossal ice drop and slicing it clean in half. He kept soaring higher until he was floating face to face with the undead boss. The rookie mages below scrambled to block the raining ice chunks. The Lich was completely spiraling, screaming that a measly 5-star mage couldn't possibly pull this off. Frey hit him with the coldest smirk, saying he simply knew the true path. The bony freak screamed back in his face, demanding to know the truth. Did he seriously know what existed beyond the 5-star realm? Frey just completely clowned on him, telling him to try way harder because his weak little spells didn't mean absolute squat up here. Shaking with rage, the Lich demanded to know who he actually was. The hero first introduced himself as Frey Blake, the absolute biggest loser of the academy, and just that name alone made the monster shiver. Then came the ultimate mic drop. He declared he was Lucas Trauman, back from the grave after 4,000 years. The absolute strongest mage in human history. Down below, the struggling mages were practically passing out, just trying to withstand the raw aura. While they fought to stay conscious, Isabel stared up at the sky, biting her nails in pure anxiety. Completely losing his mind, the monster screamed that it was impossible because Lucas was dead, then launched himself forward for a desperate final strike. In a flash, Frey teleports right behind him. "You know, you actually look way better from this angle," he smirks, before plunging his hand straight through the monster's chest. Our boy looks dead at it, claiming he knows exactly what this thing is. "Did you seriously think you'd survive this Lich?" he taunts. He casually mentions he totally guessed where the core was hiding, since the creepy dude made it a major pain to track down. The monster screams for mercy. "Wait, stop!" But Frey just crushes the stone like glass. Boom. A massive shockwave rips through the area. The beast crumbles into dust, dissolving into nothingness. Frey just floats there, his expression ice cold, watching the fallout. Down on the ship, the students are absolutely shook by how fast it was over. Meanwhile, the pirates completely lose their minds, realizing they're screwed. The red-haired villain is having a total meltdown, stammering about how this is straight up impossible. But before he can even blink, Frey is already standing right behind him. The look in his eyes says it all. Playtime is over. No more negotiations. Every single pirate on that deck is about to catch hands. Fast forward and the entire crew is wiped out. The redhead. Yeah, he got utterly wrecked, taking the worst beating out of the whole bunch. Frey stands like an absolute boss among the sea of knocked-out bodies, finishing the massacre with one brutal, earth-shattering downward strike. Dusting himself off, he turns around. The students are staring from afar, jaws on the floor. Isabel in particular. She's looking at him like he's a literal god. By sunrise, they finally hit the docks. Frey hops off the ship with Isabel, but Ander suddenly blocks his path, totally hyping up his crazy skills. He straight up fanboys over him. But Frey, he just ignores him and keeps walking. Isabel is totally baffled by his ice-cold vibe. But Ander isn't giving up. He rushes over, dropping into a deep bow. He aggressively thanks Frey and swears he'll pay him back for saving his life. Flustered Isabel quickly tells Ander to chill with the intense bowing. Frey blinks slightly caught off guard before his tense shoulders finally drop. In a quiet voice, he actually checks in on the kid, asking if the explosive shockwave roughed him up at all. Ander brushes it off, saying he was totally prepped for that kind of chaos. Frey actually lets out a genuine chuckle at that, which prompts Isabel to sigh and scold him, telling him to stop being. The trio strolls through the bustling city streets, but Ander just can't shake his curiosity. He turns to Frey, demanding to know what exactly happened back there. He's absolutely baffled. How did Frey obliterate that lich without even breaking a sweat? For a normal mage pulling off a stunt like that, Ander admits he's heard the rumors that Frey was supposed to be the absolute worst student at the academy. He narrows his eyes, asking if Frey had been secretly masking his true power this whole time. Frey just gives him a deadpan look. Hard to say, he shrugs coolly. Life's just full of plot twists. A heavy silence drops between them. They lock eyes for a tense moment until the blonde finally caves, shrugging his shoulders and shattering the awkwardness. He nods, admitting that yeah, crazier things have happened. Meanwhile, the girl trails quietly behind them. Feeling deeply indebted after the whole ordeal, Ander extends a formal invitation. He wants Frey to visit his estate so he can properly reward. This high-class offer leaves Isabel completely speechless, her cheeks flushing bright red as she eagerly waits for his answer. But Frey, he just casually brushes it off, saying he'll think about it if his schedule clears up. His companion practically blows a gasket. Are you kidding me? How on earth could he just casually reject a high-ranking noble's invitation? Once the gears click in Frey's head, he completely switches up his tune. He smirks, admitting he might swing by if there's a solid payoff. This just makes Isabel see red, and she furiously snaps at him, calling him a total scumbag. Frey looks genuinely clueless as she screams about how begging for cash is utterly shameless. He fires right back, bluntly reminding her that they are completely broke strictly because of her. Cutting through their bickering, Ander politely waves it off, saying he really doesn't mind, but he is super curious. Why exactly do they need the cash? Frey lays it out simply. He desperately needs to use the Cossophony teleportation stone, and the toll is insanely steep. This instantly piques Ander's interest. A light bulb goes off in the rich kid's head. He digs into his fancy pouch and casually pulls out a handful of shiny gold coins, offering them up as a massive thank. We are talking 3 solid gold coins equivalent to 300 regular ones. The massive payout has the duo instantly beaming from ear to ear. Frey tries to be reasonable, pointing out they only need 20 gold, but the generous noble totally insists they pocket the whole stash. Frey lets out an exhausted sigh, thinking to himself that this guy is the ultimate spoiled rich kid. They keep trekking forward, chatting away. Along the way, the blonde starts pushing the home invitation again. He rattles off reason after reason, and honestly, Frey is getting super annoyed. When Frey finally snaps and tells him to drop it, Ander defensively claims he was just trying to be polite. He casually name-drops that his powerful father personally handles all family matters. He spills the tea that his dad is actually planning an arranged marriage for him with the daughter of the prestigious Aquarette family. Boom. Now Frey is listening. Frey immediately leans in. Does this fiancé of yours happen to have a hot older sister? Ander blinks, explaining that she hails from a high-ranking noble kingdom. Without missing a beat, Frey mutters that he'd honestly settle for a wealthy aunt, making Isabel cringe hard. Ander pushes on, adding that this specific kingdom breeds absolute powerhouses, and they'd probably be super disappointed to find out he's completely mediocre at magic. Isabel immediately jumps in, softly telling him to stop doubting himself, because he's way stronger than he realizes. Then Frey grabs the kid by the shoulders, looking him dead in the eye. He tells him to keep his chin up, because a ridiculously handsome guy like himself is here to save the day. This intense pep talk gets Ander all flustered, but Frey instantly ruins the wholesome vibe, sliding in a reminder to hit him up if that fiancé really does have an older sister. Or a loaded aunt. This absolutely sends Isabel over the edge. She starts screaming her lungs out, calling him a massive pervert. The blonde just stares, taking a deep breath, and then out of nowhere, he bursts into uncontrollable laughter. Wiping a tear, he admits it's been forever since he laughed this hard, warmly calling the chaotic duo his new friends. The hours melt away, and as the late afternoon sun sets, Ander finally sighs, saying it's time for him to head back. He throws out one last invitation to his estate, insisting his conscience won't rest until he properly repays them. Unfazed, Frey just repeats his lazy excuse he'll slide by if he cue Isabel glaring daggers at him again. The three of them exchange a lingering look, standing in quiet hesitation, before finally going their separate ways. Isabel smiles softly, taking that awkward silence as a really good sign. As they wave their final goodbyes, Frey silently admits to himself that the rich kid might actually make a decent ally. Frey remarks that the kid was surprisingly grounded, exactly how high-class nobles actually should act. His fiery companion totally agrees. That is until Frey shamelessly adds, plus his pockets are ridiculously deep. Instantly, the redhead is fuming all over again. Frey is completely oblivious. Why is she mad this time? When she finally blows up at him, he casually defends himself, pointing out it's not his fault they're dead broke. Cut to the very next day. Isabel is living her best life, trying on an endless mountain of shiny new outfits and sleek armor. She models a super flashy, high-tier mage robe, doing a little twirl, and asking Frey if she looks cute. Frey just stares blankly. "I just want to go home," he groans. He totally kills her vibe, telling her to pick something functional, instead of this frilly garbage that's just gonna get her killed in combat. She freezes, utterly bewildered by his bluntness. You can physically see her irritation bubbling up to the surface. She furiously yells that she's just excited to finally wear something nice for once. Meanwhile, dense as a rock, Frey still cannot compute why she's throwing a tantrum. The awkward store clerk nervously chuckles, pointing out that her companion clearly prefers a more minimalist aesthetic. Frey rubs his temples, deeply regretting his life choices, and wishing he had literally never brought her shopping. A little while later, standing right at the edge of the bustling city limits, our chaotic duo finally sets off on their journey again. Frey watches her pack, admitting that no matter how many times he sees it in action, that specific item is absolutely mind-blowing. Her magical spatial pouch literally defies physics, holding way more gear than physically possible. She just waves it off, acting like it's no big deal. And when Frey teasingly asks if she's just being petty about earlier, she sharply cuts him off, snapping that it doesn't even matter anymore. Frey takes a deep breath, letting the reality sink in. He scans the bustling crowd, realizing that, just like the Warpstone Society totally leveled up and the population skyrocketed. But then it hits him. He's been MIA for 4,000 years. He wagers that the demigod kept coming back to mess with things. To those divine freaks, humans are literally just ants. Isabel snaps him out of it, asking what's cooking in his head. She points out they've finally hit the Warpstone. Frey just scratches his cheek, still zoning out. "I'll figure that out later." He brushes her off. An announcer barks that the gate is powering up, commanding everyone to step inside the magic circle. Frey actually looks impressed. Managing separate squads like this, the modern portal tech is seriously next level. Meanwhile, Isabel is practically dying of cringe, begging him to stop acting like a tourist. Above them, a massive arcane circle flares to life, expanding outward. Frey casually drops a warning. First-timers usually puke, by the way. She instantly snaps back that she already knows. Flash. The portal triggers. A gut-wrenching zero-gravity sensation hits them as they get yanked through a trippy, tunnel-like void. Bam! The ride stops. Frey glances up. He scans the rugged landscape, a nostalgic smirk hitting him. 4,000 years, and some things still look exactly the same, he mutters. He spins around to ask about their next move, only to catch Isabel aggressively hurling her guts out from the warp sickness. Wiping her mouth, she stubbornly insists it's just because she skipped breakfast. "Food will totally fix this," she groans. Frey just stares, thinking, I seriously shouldn't have brought this kid. Not too far off, a bunch of rough-looking guys are throwing back beers in a dingy tavern. The crusty bartender squints, noticing something outside. But he gets distracted as Frey bursts through the doors loudly demanding grub and booze. Isabel's jaw literally drops when he orders liquor. "Are you insane? That is so irresponsible," she screeches. Frey just shoots her a cold look. "Shut it." She has zero clue how crazy long it's been since he tasted a real drop of liquor. He scoffs, totally baffled. Why the Magic Academy bans booze in the first place? Isabel is too stunned to speak. But then she explodes again, screeching that the reason is obvious. Frey just shrugs it off. Whatever. Back in the day, everyone started drinking at 13 anyway. The bartender slides their order across the table, eyeing them. "You kids mercenaries?" he asks. Frey completely blanks him, his face lighting up like a kid on Christmas as the food drops. The bartender scoffs. "If you're out here, you gotta be rookies. Especially rocking that shiny, untouched gear. Dressed like you're about to hunt a damn dragon," he mutters. Frey just keeps violently stuffing his face, ignoring him. The bald old man sighs, saying it's not entirely a bad thing. Rich kids should just enjoy being young and dumb. But his tone darkens. "Eat up and go home. Greenhorns have no business messing with these mountains." Isabel chimes in, saying she heard the peaks are crawling with lethal monsters. That completely sets the bartender off. "You don't know a damn thing about what you're saying," he growls. She shrinks back, terrified, while the crusty adventurers nearby burst into mocking laughter, totally cracking up at the thought of these soft kids surviving the peaks. Frey zones all the drama out, aggressively scarfing down his meal. Suddenly the bartender's anger fades. "My bad," he mutters, confessing he has a son right around their age. He rubs his neck, explaining the kid actually trained to be a merc once, which is why he got so triggered. Isabel softly asks where his son is now. The old man's eyes drop. He's gone. Tried to conquer the mountain. She instantly stammers out an apology, but he waves it off. "It's fine. I'm the one who trauma dumped on you kids." The old-timer stares into space, explaining his boy took a job escorting a mother and her little girl, and only the little girl made it back alive. She was the one who told him his son wasn't ever coming home. He lets out a heavy sigh. "Look, I'm not trying to roast you kids, but hiking up that death trap is pure suicide. You won't make it out." Isabel is totally paralyzed, the grim reality of his story hitting her hard. Suddenly Frey shatters the heavy tension. He wipes his mouth, completely unbothered, and loudly declares, "This grub is absolute fire." Without skipping a beat, he casually asks the old man what kind of freaks actually live up there. Curiously, Isabel takes a tiny bite, wanting to see if Frey's hype is real. Her face instantly scrunches up. The food tastes absolutely radioactive. The bartender stares a hole into Frey. "You really walking into that meat grinder knowing it's a one-way trip?" Frey stays dead silent, his eyes locked with the old man's. The bartender gets the message loud and clear. He mutters something about needing a drink himself. Yet the second they scrape their plates clean, he slams a weathered map on the table, pointing out the hot zones. Isabel admits she had a rough strategy, but this intel is way more clutch than she expected. She pulls out her coin pouch, asking what the damage is for the massive feast and booze, genuinely thanking him for the help. The old-timer just shakes his head, sliding her coins back. "Keep it in your pocket. This one's on the house. You kids can settle the tab later." His eyes narrow. Frey quirks an eyebrow. "How do you even keep this dump running if you hand out freebies like that?" The old man chuckles dryly, saying he gets that a lot. Fast forward to later that night. As they head out into the dark, Frey drops a genuine, "Thanks for the meal." The bartender smirks, calling him out on his BS. "Don't lie to me, kid. My cooking is straight garbage, but at least the booze hits the spot." The old man waves them off, promising he'll never forget them, and swearing the sausages will be top tier next time around. Frey just smirks, telling him he's holding him to that. Flashing a warm, toothy grin, the old guy watches them leave. Our duo doesn't waste a second, plunging deep into the dense, creeping forest, eyes locked on the jagged mountains ahead. Fast forward to the dead of night, and absolute chaos breaks loose. The darkness shatters as blinding blue lightning erupts from a warrior's heavy strike. Shockwaves rip through the air, violently rattling the earth beneath their feet. Hanging back in the shadows, Isabel keeps her eyes peeled, calculating every single move of the brawl. Beside her Frey is a total brick wall, dead silent. His expression all around them, bodies collide, and weapons clash, tearing the ruined wasteland apart. Isabel squints through the dust, pointing out that the enemy is throwing everything they have just to stall their... Frey doesn't flinch. He flat out says they'll just bulldoze straight through the front line if they have to. The tension spikes as they frantically brainstorm their next move. Our main guy casually asks what the point of all this is, literally unbothered by the deadly chaos around him. She snaps back that this whole mess is way deeper than it looks. There's some seriously shady stuff happening behind the curtain. Suddenly their eyes lock onto a massive, towering structure, completely swallowed by violently swirling energy. She bets everything that this bizarre monolith is the missing piece to all the recent madness. Meanwhile, lurking in the pitch-black shadows, hidden enemies are itching for the perfect moment to ambush. A chill runs down their spines. They definitely aren't alone. From here on out, one wrong step means game over. She breaks down the situation, pointing out a major red flag. Isabel hesitates, desperately trying to wrap her head around his insane logic. Frey just raises a single finger, completely unfazed. With absolute swagger, he drops a bombshell everything hinges on. Exactly 1 month. Isabel immediately calls cap on his strategy, stressing that a single month isn't even close to being enough time to pull this off. But he refuses to back down, dead set on the fact that if they grind efficiently, they'll catch a massive win. The second the sun peaks over the horizon, all hell breaks loose again, and Frey violently charges into the fray with a blinding wave of blue aura. The slaughter rages on, as Isabel weaves like a ghost through the deafening explosions. She flawlessly sidesteps a barrage of lethal strikes, coiling her muscles to launch a brutal counter-offensive. Meanwhile, Frey just hangs back, coldly downloading every single twitch and tactic of the enemy. Then he finally drops the master plan, a high-stakes gamble that could instantly flip the entire board. Smash cut to a breathtaking morning, as golden sunlight floods the rugged terrain. The girl stands absolutely glued to the spot, staring in pure awe at a downright colossal waterfall. She's completely shook by the sheer scale of it. The thunderous roar of crashing water drowns out everything as the squad slips into a secret, hidden grotto, tucked perfectly behind the raging falls, where a massive secret is waiting. Deep inside the damp cavern, a pulsing golden orb glows with an eerie, otherworldly vibe, hovering effortlessly in the dead center. The radiant light paints the rocky walls, and Frey spots its insane value the second he lays eyes on it. The red-headed warrior literally drops to her knees, totally overwhelmed, as the blinding aura aggressively flares up. She's staring at it, completely caught between fascination and panic, while our MC doesn't even break a sweat. With just a flick of his wrist, he effortlessly commands this god-tier level of raw power. Tiny glowing specks begin to dance around him like fireflies, and as the wild energy aggressively funnels straight into his palms, he simply drops into a deep, meditative trance, completely swallowed by a blazing blue aura. Man, even the massive waterfall outside starts reacting to his flex, violently surging with even more pressure. The girl is absolutely speechless, just taking it all in. Out of nowhere, the vibe abruptly shifts, and the blinding light twists into a dark, suffocating purple glow. Frey snaps his eyes open, locked in, and hyper-focused, practically tasting the insane power shift about to drop. Without skipping a single beat, Isabel boldly marches right to the center, stepping directly into the chaotic storm of energy, letting the raw power completely swallow her whole. Frey just smirks, like he finally just proved to himself how ridiculously cracked her potential actually is. He looks super satisfied as the terrifying aura erupts into a blinding, swirling vortex, illuminating every inch of the cavern. Fast forward through the brutal, sweat-drenched grind session. The suffocating pressure finally fades out, leaving our girl breathless, desperately trying to compute the insane glow-up she just experienced. She shoots a glance his way, only to catch him flashing this smug, overly proud grin. Then out of absolutely nowhere, Frey casually drops that they should probably grab a bite to eat. Caught totally off guard by the mood whiplash, Isabel blinks for a split second before a genuine smile breaks across her face. She softly thanks him, admitting that he really has evolved into a totally different person. The old him. Yeah, he wouldn't have been caught dead dragging her to a secret hideout just to level. Honestly, just a few weeks ago, she couldn't even picture hanging out with him like this. The guy used to seriously creep her out, but lately, something about his brand new aura just keeps pulling her in. She trails off for a second, biting her lip, as she carefully crafts her next words. These days, he legit feels like a completely different guy, like this absolute mastermind who's always 10 steps ahead. Raising an eyebrow, he leans in playfully, asking which version of him is the real deal. She completely freezes, scrambling for an answer before letting out a soft, breathy laugh, telling him that both of them are. In her eyes, people don't magically reboot, they just level up. He slowly shuts his eyes and gives a low, approving nod. Isabel pours her heart out again, super hyped about this new version of him. Seriously, the old Frey would never take her on an exclusive one-on-one training arc. But then she violently hits the brakes, her anxiety randomly spiking about what's actually supposed to happen next. I mean, they're literally about to be totally isolated together in this tiny, claustrophobic cave for an entire month. But Frey aggressively shatters the tension, coldly dropping that he has zero interest in little girls. He completely brushes her off, telling her to stop sweating the small stuff. Her face flushes a deep, furious red. Ignoring her confusion, Frey starts weaving a spell. He throws up a snare barrier, basically a massive magical net, just in case any creeps try to ambush them in the dark. Then he literally just crashes on the floor. He mumbles that it's bedtime and tells her to knock out too. 2 seconds later, he is dead to the world, snoring away. Isabel honestly has the overwhelming urge to punch him square in the jaw. Morning rolls around and Isabel is still totally out cold. She slowly drags her heavy eyelids open, dreading the absolute grind ahead of her. She pulls herself up looking absolutely drained. Meanwhile, Frey has been wide awake for ages. She barely managed to scrape together 5 hours of sleep. And spoiler alert, that would be her last real break. Because this training arc is about to get brutally hardcore. Frey introduces her to the Khazadin method, straight up known as conflict. It is an insanely reckless, high-risk way to level up. So he orders her to stay back and just take notes. Instantly, the vibe completely shifts. A heavy aura explodes from him, and as he flexes his magic, a blazing core materializes in thin air, showing off the raw energy he's mixing the spells, suddenly split apart, mutating into a completely new, unstable state. Frey rips his internal mana right down the middle, separating it into fire and water. These completely polar elements violently crash into each other, locked in a brutal stalemate. Eyes shut tight, Frey forces the Inferno and the tidal wave to submit to his will. He dials all his intense focus into maintaining the technique. As he manipulates the surging hydro energy inside him, the elements start moving like they have a wild mind of their own. The water lashes out on the offensive, while the fire desperately throws up defenses to block it. Meanwhile, his physical core stays completely anchored to the flames. He is forced to walk a deadly razor's edge, perfectly balancing both sides, so neither one completely takes over. It is basically like trying to balance a seesaw during a massive earthquake. Staring in absolute awe, Isabel realizes just how insane this system really is. This was conflict, the legendary Khazadin method. Her eyes are glued to Frey, fiercely analyzing every single twitch. Taking a deep breath, she hypes herself up and decides to dive in too. Squeezing her eyes shut, she violently pulls energy into her core. Instantly, the rival forces start violently clashing inside her, exactly the way she was shown. She desperately tries to force the chaotic energy into a perfect, stable equilibrium. But no matter how hard she pushes, she just can't hack it. The sheer strain immediately makes her sick to her stomach. She violently collapses to the dirt, groaning in pure, blinding agony. All of that brutal backlash, just from slipping up for a single microsecond. This method is straight up merciless. Meanwhile, Frey is just chilling in a deep meditative trance, acting like absolutely nothing is wrong, not even breaking a sweat. Isabel seriously starts questioning who this absolute monster actually is. Later on, she strips completely down to take a much-needed skinny dip. After getting absolutely wrecked all day, the crystal-clear water feels like heaven. She washes off the heavy grime. Her mind races. Stepping out, she throws her clothes back on and shoves her gear into her bag. Then, she carefully lines up a few jagged rocks next to her. One massive boulder sits right in front of her, flanked by 6 tiny pebbles. With a simple flick of her wrist, she sweeps the small pebbles away and swaps them out for another heavy stone. It is a rough, low-tech calendar to track how long they have been down here. And reality suddenly hits her. It has already been 2 full weeks. For 14 straight days, Frey hasn't budged an inch. My guy has literally just been spamming that psychotic training routine deep inside the dark cave. Slipping quietly past the magical barrier, Isabel sneaks back in to check on his progress. As her heavy bag hits the dirt, a weird chill crawls up her spine, instantly drawing her closer. Massive waves of blinding blue energy are literally flooding the entire cavern. Right in the eye of the storm sits Frey, legs crossed completely in the zone. That overwhelming tsunami of mana. It is solid proof he is hovering right on the edge of the 6th grade, hitting that massive tier in just 14 days. She has literally never seen anyone speedrun their magic stats this fast. The raw, crushing pressure radiating off his body totally glues her boots to the floor. But in Frey's mind, this progress is still way too slow. He demands faster results, tighter control. Completely mind-blown, Isabel watches him for a beat, then stubbornly drops down right across from him. She sharply mirrors his exact posture and dives right back into the hellish technique. Outside, a violent thunderstorm relentlessly rips through the mountains. Locked tight inside the dark cave, the duo just keeps grinding. Boom. 3 whole weeks gone. The heavy rock pile keeps stacking up to track the lost days. They constantly flare their auras, though her grip on the magic is nowhere near his absolute godly level. Suddenly, a bizarre, dangerous glitch sparks deep in her gut. Yet again, she is completely outclassed by his terrifying, unbreakable focus. One tiny hiccup, and the whole delicate system totally crashes. But honestly, enduring this chaotic method is buffing her stats at a genuinely terrifying speed. Nobody in her entire bloodline ever trained this savagely, which makes total sense why today's modern mages look like absolute pathetic scrubs in comparison. Then she catches a sharp whiff of her own shirt and instantly gags. She literally reeks. Her eyes immediately dart back toward the hidden waterfall tunnel. The protective barrier was straight up shattering, like something massive just punched right through it. Boom! It completely collapsed. A colossal beast loomed over her, and pure panic flooded her eyes. Because honestly, it looked like a giant, terrifying chicken. Right then, Frey snapped his eyes open to check the chaos. Yanked out of his deep meditation, he instantly clocked it a literal phoenix. Isabel was totally frozen, mind blown that a mythical beast was actually standing right there. But our guy Frey zero fear. Instead, he just stared at this absolute unit with pure awe. Catching his vibe, she tried to chill out and actually look at the flaming bird. Sure, the Hispania Mountains were packed with crazy monsters, but a literal divine beast hanging out here. Wild. Turns out the blazing fire mana from Frey's hardcore training had completely drawn it in. Frey casually reached out his hand, coaxing the flaming beast. Isabel absolutely lost it, screaming that humans couldn't just tame godly creatures. The phoenix tracked his every single move, eyes locked. But Frey kept sliding forward, super chill, super steady. While Isabel braced herself from a distance, boom. The fiery bird just let Frey stroke its glowing feathers, zero aggression. Isabel was completely shook. How was he touching those blazing flames? With his bare hands. But seeing the beast act so incredibly docile, her panic started to fade. That's when she spotted the brutal gaping claw marks slashed across its entire body. Its chest was practically ripped open. It was honestly a miracle the thing was even breathing. Wait, could a phoenix actually die? The legends literally say they rise from the ashes, but Frey shut that down, explaining they just tank lethal damage way better than normal beasts. They weren't immortal. Speechless, Isabel realized something deeply terrifying. These mountains must be crawling with nightmares, strong enough to practically body a legendary phoenix. Whatever this bird threw down with it was definitely endgame boss material. Gently brushing its glowing feathers, Frey softly promised to fix it up. He held his ground, waiting for the massive beast to give him the green light. Seconds later, the majestic creature completely dropped its guard, fully trusting him. To Isabel, the terrifying beast suddenly just looked like a giant, sleepy baby bird. Frey smirked, joking that this overpowered pigeon was about to score a free carry from all his intense training. The phoenix just cracked an eye open, judging him so hard. Still, the healing magic was already kicking in. Frey channeled massive waves of pure energy, knitting the brutal wounds back together. Isabel couldn't look away. Right now. He didn't even feel like the Frey she knew. His vibe, his facial expressions, everything completely shifted. Even the heavy air around him felt incredibly serene. Patching up the fiery bird, Frey got massive flashbacks of an old buddy playfully roasting the phoenix for being scared of a little rain. instantly triggered. The massive bird snapped up, glaring at him. The tension spiked. It felt like these two were about to start sprinting up the mountain to throw down. Honestly, just feeling those flaming feathers hit Frey with a massive wave of pure nostalgia. Within minutes, the gruesome gashes fully sealed up. Once a phoenix gets its mana back, its legendary auto-heal kicks right into overdrive. Moments later, the beast stood tall. Raw, blazing power erupted from its core as it unleashed a massive, ear-shattering screech. Frey just smiled, totally soaking in the good old days. They locked eyes for a second, a silent mutual respect passing between them. Then, with a massive flap of its wings, it took off, painting the sky with brilliant fire. Fully restored, the creature looked like an absolute god. Back in the cave, a single glowing feather sat on the ground, a parting gift. See, a genuine phoenix feather could heal fatal wounds, or craft top-tier magical gear. It was insanely rare, epic loot. That flaming bird definitely knew how to clear its tab. Frey couldn't resist dropping a joke, teasing that Isabel was exactly like the phoenix, except she was utterly useless in absolutely every situation. It took a second for the burn to land. She was so offended. How could this guy be an absolute sweetheart to a giant flaming chicken, but a total menace to actual human beings? Completely ignoring her raging glare, he zoned right back into his fierce combat meditation, leaving Isabel to just sit there, totally ignored while he drifted off into his intense mental training. Outside, the storm was getting aggressively worse, swallowing the entire night. But by sunrise, golden rays finally pierced through the heavy clouds. Fresh dewdrops sparkled on the wet leaves outside. Looking at the etched marks on the wall, it had already been 4 whole weeks. Inside that damp cave, Frey was still grinding. 0 breaks. Isabel watched him like a hawk. After an entire month of hardcore training, he looked ready to literally drop dead. 0 food, just pure, uninterrupted meditation for a full week. She was low-key freaking out, but at the same time, he looked like a literal enlightened grandmaster. She stared, completely mesmerized by the raw aura radiating off his body. In her eyes, the dude was absolutely one of a kind. Sure, he had a massive attitude problem and a super edgy vibe, but seeing his gentle, soothing side with the phoenix, combine that with his insane god-tier knowledge and the way he spoke with 1,000 years of wisdom, it all screamed that he was destined to be an absolute legend. Sometimes Isabel couldn't help but flash back to that legendary mage she'd once witnessed. Maybe her deep respect and awe for him were blossoming into something way deeper. Out of nowhere, Frey's breathing shifted, becoming dangerously precise and controlled. Fully on edge, she held her breath, terrified that something insane was about to drop. Then his aura absolutely detonated, unleashing all the wild energy he'd stockpiled from the chaos. When his eyes finally snapped open, pure exhaustion was written all over his face. A split second later, he forced himself to stand. Absolutely shell-shocked, Isabel realized he had actually pulled it off. In just 1 single month, he had shattered the impossible. She immediately hyped him up. He had finally hit the 7th grade. Frey inspected his own body, literally feeling the insane power surge through his veins. To Isabel, the entire sight was completely mind-blowing. The youngest prodigy to ever hit the 6th grade had been 35 years old. If the world found out that some academy kid had pulled this off, absolute chaos would break out. Just by taking a breath, Frey was passively soaking up raw mana. But then his expression twisted as he sensed something was totally off. He stumbled hard, and Isabel sprinted over to catch him. After starving for a straight week, his physical body was practically running on fumes. He desperately needed some heavy, greasy food, ASAP, meaning they had to go hunting, but she never doubted he'd bounce back. So the duo finally stepped out of the cave. Outside, they stumbled onto the aftermath of a totally brutal bloodbath. Mutilated monster corpses were scattered, literally everywhere. While he was deep in meditation, Frey hadn't sensed a single beast nearby. It looked like the phoenix had actually been guarding them. Flashing back to how it had miraculously healed him, Frey felt a huge rush of gratitude, knowing deep down their paths would cross again. Since dinner was literally lying right there, he decided they'd feast first before heading out to face the mad Mirage Visor. Out of nowhere, a blood-curdling scream shattered the silence, and both of their heads snapped toward the sound. It was unmistakably human, and it sounded dangerously close. Starving or not, they had to go check it out right now. Frey instantly geared up, and with one explosive leap, he launched himself into the sky. Totally panicking, Isabel kept screaming his name as she was left in the dust, completely clueless on what to do. Off in the distance, the guy's agonizing wails were only getting worse. Sobbing and begging for his life, he was strapped to a tree with throwing knives pinned all around his shaking body. His entire crew was already dead, and these sick bandits rocking jagged skull masks were treating his torture like a twisted game. Thankfully, Vice Captain Victor's aim was absolute trash, thanks to a massive hangover. Juan snatched the blade away, calling next. But the boss, Laureano, barked at them to quit messing around. Tearing into a chunk of meat, he grumbled about when that mysterious chick would finally show up again, completely sick of roughing it in these mountains. Juan dramatically raised his weapon and demanded an audience, totally flexing that he was about to nail the captive, dead in the forehead. The hostage shut his eyes, absolutely certain he was done for. Juan violently chucked the knife, and the guy shrieked as it zoomed straight at his face. But then something slammed into the blade, completely knocking it off course. The knife violently buried itself into the dirt instead. Every single bandit froze in pure confusion. One of them even cracked a joke, blaming the wind for ruining the shot. Bored of their sick game, they started packing up their gear, when Victor suddenly spotted someone creeping right beside him. It was Frey, materializing out of nowhere, like a straight-up ghost. In a heartbeat, Victor knew he was staring at pure danger. Juan instantly yanked out his blade, totally ready to throw down. Frey stood dead still, his cold eyes scanning the absolute massacre scattered across the camp. His gaze slowly shifted, realizing these monsters had literally been using living people as target practice. They were obviously getting a kick out of it. One bandit even laughed, thinking Frey was just a walking corpse because of how trashed he looked. Then the slaughter began. Before a single soul could even blink, Frey blitzed Victor in a flash, cleanly ripping his head right off his shoulders. Juan was left totally paralyzed by the stranger's god-tier speed, while the rest of the crew panicked in pure terror. Catching wind of the absolute chaos, Captain Laureano dropped his food. A terrifyingly overpowered weapon sparked to life in front of him, literally erasing his men in the blink of an eye. The target completely vanished from sight. It was a 5th-grade light scythe, an absolutely menacing weapon, and Frey was gripping it with the cold-blooded intention of making them pay. Meanwhile, Isabel was desperately tearing through the woods, frantically sprinting back and forth while gasping for air. When she finally caught up to Frey, she walked right into a straight-up horror movie. He was just standing there, dead-eyed, surrounded by a mountain of mangled corpses. He had wiped out the entire squad, purposely letting only one rat escape, so he could hunt him down later. Both of them just blankly stared down at the dirt, lost in thought, locking eyes with the severed head of the vice captain. That told Frey the captain was still breathing. Tilting her head, the little girl curiously asked if he was going to wipe out the entire crew. After the sheer horrors they unleashed on innocent civilians, looking the other way just wasn't an option. He had to shut down this demigod's sick little game of watching mere mortals suffer and tear each other apart. It might sound petty, but the mere thought of that twisted creature getting a kick out of absolutely anything made Frey physically sick to his stomach. Suddenly, a trembling voice broke the silence. The guy strapped to the tree choked out a massive thank you for pulling him from the brink. Despite the guy leaking crimson everywhere, Frey flat out refused to drag him along. Pure panic washed over the wounded warrior, and he practically begged for a lifeline, terrified of fading out like a nobody in the dirt. Sobbing uncontrollably, he swore he just needed to make peace with his old man before taking his final breath. That desperate confession actually caught Frey's attention. Just a stone's throw away, a bunch of grunts were gossiping about how the entire third squad just got complete. Captain Carl rolled his eyes, assuming they were completely wasted to be spitting such absolute nonsense. But the survivor swore on his life that he watched the sheer carnage go down with his own 2 eyes. The assailant, spiky gray hair, a scrawny build, and reeked of absolute decay. This dude was definitely not your average human. His combat skills were so insanely cracked that they didn't even have a split second to counter. He took everyone's heads off in a flash, leaving this trembling mess as the lone survivor. Now that definitely piqued Captain Carl's interest. Sounded like a heavy-hitter mage. The intel claimed this guy was casually casting 12 spells simultaneously, making him a top-tier battle mage. His underling nodded in agreement. Enraged, the captain aggressively shot up from his seat. He barked orders at his crew to hunt down the trespasser ASAP and report back. The plan: swarm the guy, and put him in the ground. Even so, Carl highly doubted the prestigious Overpowered family would ever hire a rogue caster like that. He grilled the bandit, asking if they were seriously using human beings for target practice. The living bullseye was just some random merc the captain recognized. He'd been playing bodyguard for a mother-daughter duo out picking herbs. That little detail left Carl scratching his head over who this mystery mage actually was. Cut to a nearby scene, an absolutely wrecked carriage. Flipped on its side, luggage scattered everywhere. The fallen escorts are completely motionless, painting a grim picture of one hell of a bloodbath. One poor guy had a massive arrow lodged deep in his gut, fully aware his clock was ticking fast. Captain Carl loomed over him, a sinister smirk creeping across his face. He'd spent ages hunting down Sonia, the eldest daughter of the legendary Overpowered Knight bloodline, but she was stubborn, refusing to throw in the towel, clapping back with everything in her arsenal. Sonia was an absolute beast with a blade. One clean swing and she instantly dropped 3 guys. Anyone foolish enough to rush her got sent straight to the afterlife. But honestly, the insane fatigue was finally catching up to her. Yet her guard rarely slipped. She aggressively lunged straight for the captain, going for the kill, but some lackey threw himself in the way, eating the lethal strike. Steel clashed violently against steel, proving seconds later a brutal, bone-rattling hit launched Sonia flying backward through the air. She furiously jammed her blade into the dirt, skidding backward to barely keep herself from collapsing. You could tell just by looking at her, Sonia Overpowered was running completely on fumes. Carl totally clowned on her taunting that she must be in a serious relationship with that sword, since she absolutely refused to drop it. Guess the crazy rumors out of the Luinoble Kingdom were legit, after all. Tucked right behind her, a maid was completely breaking down in terror. Their badass protector was totally out of gas. And yet, staring down 0 odds of survival, Sonia refused to take the knee. The captain just stood there, flashing a psychotic grin, absolutely feeding off the horrific chaos he'd orchestrated. He practically licked his chops every time his eyes locked onto Sonia, freezing out in those mountains for over a month, totally worth the payoff. Her drop-dead gorgeous looks were definitely no myth. At just 18, the elite noble heir had already earned herself the terrifying nickname, the Storm. Scanning the battlefield, Sonia's heart sank as she realized her entire squad was wiped. The only ones left breathing were 2 shivering maids and Sir Luther. Honestly, she was the only one left who could actually swing a weapon, but she was staring down roughly 20 hardcore veterans. Carl arrogantly demanded to know where she was hiding her personal mage. Sonia just looked at him blankly, totally clueless. An elite knight household. Like the Overpowereds would never stoop to hiring a spellcaster for protection, which meant the absolute powerhouse melting his crew had literally 0 ties to her family. Still, that just made Carl crave answers about who this mystery man actually was. Then he made his sick intentions crystal clear. They weren't going to end Sonia's life just yet. He had something far more twisted planned. He fully intended to defile her. That nasty smirk gave it all away. Sonia instantly put the pieces together, and pure horror washed over her. The bandits were absolutely hyped at the sick fantasy of claiming a high-class noble. Disgust and absolute rage violently twisted across her face. She'd rather bite off her own tongue and bleed out than become his twisted plaything. But the captain's sick plans didn't stop with her. If Sonia bit the dust, her maids were next on the chopping block. These thugs had been rotting in the wilderness for over a month, completely starved of human contact. A quick death wasn't on the menu. Suddenly, the horrifying truth clicked in Sonia's mind. This was exactly why they'd kept the women breathing. The maids huddled together violently, shivering in pure terror. But even facing hell, their only fear was dragging their lady down. Watching them crumble broke Sonia entirely, tears streaming down her face. Even Sir Luther stepped up, declaring it a profound honor to lay down his life for Lady Sonia. Age couldn't touch his fierce, unwavering loyalty. But despite his courage, Sonia was completely backed into a corner. There was 0 escape. The crushing weight of her failure shattered her into a million pieces. She begged for forgiveness, shouldering the total blame for their incoming slaughter. But the maids gently cut her off. They owed their very existence to the Overpowered bloodline anyway. Defeated, Sonia bowed her head, choking down the bitter reality of their doom. Then the maids dropped a truly heartbreaking request. They begged their own lady to execute them, To them, the ultimate disgrace would be reuniting in the afterlife, tarnished and broken by those absolute scumbags. Gripping her hilt with trembling hands, pure, untouched, unbroken. Meanwhile, Captain Carls just stared completely clueless about their final pact. Eyes burning with resolve, she proclaimed that for the sacred honor of her girls and the heavy legacy of her family name, she would pull the trigger. She vowed to personally escort them on their final journey. The second it clicked for Carls, he barked at his grunts to rip Sonia Aquarid down right now. But her blade was already slicing a lethal arc straight for her maids' necks. As the bandits lunged closer, hot tears blurred her vision. Sonia squeezed her eyes shut, forcing her screaming muscles to finish the gruesome job. But when her eyes snapped open, absolute shock froze her blood. The maids were breathing. Her hands were totally empty. The sword had vanished into thin air. Her brain short-circuited. Who the hell swiped her weapon? She whipped around, glaring daggets at the bandits. But no shot any of those meatheads had that kind of stealth. The utter humiliation washed over her. It was the most crushing disgrace a knight could ever swallow. Getting disarmed, choking on a sob, she desperately apologized to her maids for failing to grant them a dignified exit. Plan B. She ordered everyone to just bite down on their own tongues. But suddenly, a mysterious voice sliced through the tension, calling her name. A wicked grin stretched across Captain Carl's face. The phantom who absolutely wiped his third squad had just materialized right behind Sonia. It was our main guy, casually gripping her missing sword, totally hijacking her tragic execution. In a split second, Frey, Isabel, and the battered survivor crash-landed right into the dead center of the chaotic standoff. This absolute flex of an entrance left everyone paralyzed. Isabel braced the bleeding survivor, who was somehow flashing a smug grin, despite barely standing upright. Carl sneered, spitting that he'd heard plenty about the freak who'd been toying with his crew. Cool as ice, Frey tossed the blade back to Sonia. He casually asked if this Carl's guy was the boss, the captain, or just the ringleader. Still reeling from the whiplash, she just clutched the hilt, totally speechless. Our MC radiated this bizarre, otherworldly aura, completely unreadable. At a glance, he looked like a fragile pushover. Pointing a gritty finger toward the jagged peaks, Carls demanded to know if he'd just hiked down from up there. That was ground zero for his mountain camp. He demanded to know exactly what went down with his boys. Frey didn't even blink. Oh, them. We just played a little game. Carl's face twisted into pure, ugly rage. He instantly shrieked at his thugs to slaughter the silver-haired punk where he stood. They knew Frey was a battle mage. It was a deadly race against the clock to blitz him before he could chant a single spell, banking on sheer numbers. Carls figured this would be a high-speed massacre, but before a single muscle twitched, Frey had already locked and loaded a terrifying amount of mana. Boom! He unleashed absolute devastation, vaporizing multiple goons at once, right from the back line. Carls was totally paralyzed, forced to watch his entire squad get casually deleted. His brain couldn't process it. How was this kid instantly casting magic without breaking a sweat? Then a colossal blast violently shook the earth, blasting thick smoke in every single direction. The raw, catastrophic power exploding from Frey's fingertips left everyone absolutely floored. Dazed and confused, Sonia managed to ask who the hell these saviors were and why they crashed the party. Isabel just flashed her a soft, reassuring smirk. "Relax," she hummed. "We're the good guys. You can finally breathe." The shockwave launched Carls like a rag doll, but he barely managed to brace himself against the jagged rubble, violently muttering to himself. He tried to convince himself that battle mages weren't gods. At the end of the day, a caster was still just a caster. Those cooldown windows between spells meant this guy couldn't keep spamming attacks forever. Watching Frey casually burn through all that mana, Carls figured the kid was just blowing through his energy reserves. It was a waiting game now. Would the mage gas out first, or would his crew shred him to pieces? Either way, Carls made a blood vow to mount that kid's head on a spike. But the second he charged, and one of his thugs got launched right into the stratosphere. Then another blast ripped through his squad, absolutely punching holes straight through their bodies. Carls felt his stomach drop. This was a total nightmare scenario. Frey just kept chaining attacks together without a single pause, completely steamrolling both the captain and his entire front line. Carls was absolutely losing his mind. How could anyone sustain this level of firepower for so long? The craziest part, Frey wasn't even breaking a sweat. This was completely off the charts. The sheer raw talent and destructive force coming off this guy eclipsed anything Carls had witnessed in his entire life. While his brain tried to process the absolute mismatch, he found himself literally crawling through the dirt. Knowing he was seconds away from a total wipeout, he tried to talk his way out of it. Propping his shattered body up with his blade, he practically begged the kid to hold his fire. His crew was either totally wiped or just too battered to lift a weapon. A win here was officially a pipe dream. They were gasping for air, absolutely suffocated by the endless barrage. Half of them had already hit the deck, desperately using their weapons just to keep their knees from buckling. The bandit boss blinked, totally thrown off, when Frey suddenly cut the assault. Instantly assuming the mage had finally tanked his mana pool, he screamed at his crew to push forward. It was do or die if they didn't finish this kid right now. They were all going straight to the grave. Watching from the back line, Sonia Aquarid nervously stepped up, offering to help Frey recharge his energy. But Isabel just smirked. She knew he didn't need a crutch. His stats were simply in a completely different league. Without missing a beat, Frey traced a glowing sigil right into the thin air, calmly telling Sonia to step back before things got messy. A split second later, the entire battlefield started to violently rumble. The shock waves were so intense that the bandits instantly lost their minds in panic. As the dirt began rolling like ocean waves right beneath their boots, even Captain Carls was completely frozen, totally clueless about the absolute hell about to break loose. The quaking ramped up to maximum overdrive, ripping massive, jagged chasms straight across the battlefield. Then, the crust of the earth literally split wide open, creating a literal abyss ready to swallow the crew whole. In seconds, the ground completely caved in. Grown men were plunging into the darkness, one after another, desperately clawing at loose rocks just to survive. Their terrified screams echoed from the pit as even the boss himself got violently dragged down by the avalanche of crushing boulders. Shaking with pure terror, the thugs were literally crying for their lives. Sonia stood there frozen, eyes wide, completely unable to process the absolute slaughter in front of her. With just one single cast, Frey had completely wiped the entire map. Not a single target made it out alive. That Earth Shatter was a massive Tier 5 spell, and Sonia's brain short-circuited, trying to figure out how he pulled it off. Isabel casually pointed out that his endless barrage from before was literally just a decoy to stack his cast time. Even knowing the trick, Sonia was totally shell-shocked. She had never in her entire life heard of anyone successfully dual casting like that. Isabel nodded it was legitimately insane. She admitted that she hadn't seen anything come close to this level of mastery until she bumped into Frey. Sonia was absolutely starstruck by the raw flex. She might have been a total rookie when it came to real blood and guts warfare, but this execution was more than enough to leave her speechless. Snapping back to reality, she gave them a super deep, emotional thank you for saving their skins. Stepping up, she formally introduced herself as the eldest daughter of the Aquarid clan, hailing straight from the prestigious Luinoble kingdom. Frey just deadpanned it, dropping only his name, Frey Blake. He wasn't even slightly fazed by the fancy royal title. Bursting into laughter, Isabel jumped in, introducing herself, and quickly smoothing over her partner's completely zero-filter attitude. Suddenly, Sonia pinched her nose, finally catching a whiff of the absolute stench radiating off the guy. Still, she didn't peg him for a street beggar, more like some crazy overpowered hermit who just crawled out of a mountain cave. Sir Luther stepped up, proving he actually knew a thing or two about the kid's bloodline. The House of Blake wasn't just some random name. They were a heavy-hitting noble family, deep within the Cast Cow Empire. The current head honcho, Isaka Blake, was a literal legend, one of the 8 elite 7-star mages in existence, holding the rank of number 6 on the global power scale. After a quick back and forth with Isabel, Frey smoothly asked where the royal squad was headed. Turns out their first checkpoint was the nearby city of Hispaniola. Since that perfectly lined up with his own route, Frey casually invited himself to tag along. But Sir Luther suddenly pumped the brakes, remembering a massive roadblock. They still had to handle the fallen guards. He told the younger crew to move ahead. The tragic reality was that the dead had to be buried right there in the dirt, because hauling an entire graveyard's worth of bodies back to town was physically impossible. But Frey stepped up, volunteering to handle the bodies himself, which completely shattered Luther's brain. With a simple snap of magic, he levitated every single corpse off the blood-stained grass, maneuvering them with borderline microscopic precision. Smashed up pieces of timber instantly stitched themselves back together, forming a massive transport cart. Sonia's jaw practically unhinged. After gently packing the bodies into the rig, Frey just looked back and casually asked, "All right, can we roll out now?" Sir Luther was utterly paralyzed, and the maids were looking at this guy like he had just descended from the heavens. With the heavy lifting done, the squad finally hit the road for the carriage just coasted through the air, totally silent under Frey's spell work, right until they hit the city limits. Sonia's jaw literally dropped when she found out he was only 20. The guy gave off this insanely mature vibe, and she couldn't wrap her head around how a kid that young possessed such god-tier strength. Frey just shrugged it off, claiming he barely even kept track of his birthday anymore. 2030, it was all just a blur to him, and all that really mattered was keeping his youthful glow intact. He then pointed out a massive red flag. Those bandits totally looked like they were waiting specifically for Sonia, right from the jump, which was sketchy as hell. Flashing back, she remembered their captain bragging about stalking her route for a whole month. That timeline lined up perfectly with when they first dipped out of Lua Noble. Sir Luther chimed in, pointing out that the Aquarit family had a massive list of haters, making it practically impossible to pinpoint exactly who pulled the strings on this ambush. Plus, those thugs weren't your average street trash. They were seriously trained killers. That meant whoever put out the hit had some serious heavy backing. With a huge grin, he mentioned how Frey had just mopped the floor with them, like it was absolutely nothing. Dying of curiosity, Sonia asked how he got so ridiculously overpowered. She always assumed mages were these fragile glass cannon types, but our boy completely shattered that stereotype. She locked eyes with him, practically begging for his secret. Frey hit her with just one word: effort. She didn't quite get it, and just went silent, letting that letdown of an answer marinate in her brain. Shortly after they rolled into safety, after tossing some covers over the bodies, the crew shoved the massive rig onto the ship. One of the maids practically tackled Sonia with a hug, bawling her eyes out. As the ship geared up to launch, she threw up a wave, bidding the rest of the crew goodbye. The huge vessel smoothly drifted off, with everyone watching from the docks. Sir Luther bowed his head, intensely grateful to Frey. Because of him, they actually got to see their families again. Flashing a smile, our MC brushed it off, saying he was just stoked he could lend a hand. He waved back, wishing them a safe trip home. But Sonia wasn't about to just let him walk away empty-handed. Totally confused, Frey asked what was up. She insisted she had to pay him back, for literally saving their lives. He shut that down immediately, saying people should just look out for each other, without expecting a fat paycheck. Sir Luther doubled down too, claiming it would be a total disgrace to send their savior off with nothing. Frey paused for a sec, actually weighing the offer. He glanced over at Isabel, gauging her vibe. Flashing a smirk, she gave him the green light to pick literally whatever he wanted. So my guy simply asked to grab dinner at some joint that slung absolutely killer sausages. After trekking through the streets for a bit, they pulled up to a spot. Sir Luther and Sonia looked completely thrown off by the heavy, greasy smell of smoke. It definitely wasn't the kind of high-class establishment royals would ever step foot in. But Frey defended it, swearing that these run-down, hole-in-the-wall spots always served the most fire food. Right on cue, a gruff voice snapped, demanding to know what the hell he meant by that. The old man smirked, saying he was pumped to see the kid again, even if he looked like absolute garbage. Frey just chuckled at the roast, and dropped the bomb that someone else had made it back in one piece too. Someone the old cook would definitely want to see. The old guy's expression instantly hardened the second it clicked who Frey was talking about. Isabel stepped up, carrying the busted-up dude on her back. The old worker completely froze, dropping a massive stack of trays in absolute shock. He couldn't process that his boy Kazan actually survived. Shaking, he instantly rushed over to patch up his nasty gashes. The guy was totally out of commission and needed a few solid days of bed rest to bounce back. Kazan had literally thrown himself in as a hostage, just to keep a mother and daughter safe. For a cheap mercenary with zero actual skills, he definitely proved he had a heart of gold. Choking on tears, Kazan begged his dad for forgiveness for blowing up at him and running away. Isabel just watched from the sidelines, letting the two have their emotional reunion. Frey figured out they were blood-related right away, considering they had the exact same intense glare. He then casually roasted Isabel, saying the extra baggage was surprisingly cracked at healing magic. Beyond annoyed Isabel finally caught on that he just called her a literal piece of luggage. Frey smoothly dodged the rage and switched topics. They were planning to crash there for the night, but the joint was packed to the brim. Since top-tier taverns always draw massive crowds, Luther suggested they hunt down another spot. But even while he was apologizing for dragging them all the way out there, Frey stubbornly argued that the sausages were 100% worth the wait. Suddenly, the old cook started aggressively kicking everyone out, screaming at the top of his lungs that the shop was totally locked down for the rest of the day. The pissed-off crowd started booing, but he wasn't having it. Snatching up their cash, he literally shoved them out the exit, and the second the last guy hit the curb, he slammed the doors shut and flipped the sign to closed. The noisy tavern was now dead silent. The old man turned to them, saying he needed to lay out a proper feast for his VIP guests, telling them to go chill and scrub off the travel dirt. By the time the sun went down, the whole squad was fully settled in. Meanwhile, Sonia was soaking it up in a massive hot bath. Totally zoned out in her own thoughts, she absent-mindedly swished the water around, without really knowing why she looked completely drained and totally out of it after that brutal day. Later on the dinner table was stacked high with every kind of pastry imaginable. Even with all that grub, the old man hauled out yet another massive tray. Frey absolutely demolished the feast like a bottomless pit. Pretty soon, Sonia Aquarit crashed the dinner party. The whole crew was just blown away by how stunning she looked. But she also seemed weirdly on edge. She called out to Frey, but he just told her to grab a seat and dig in. Her face was practically glowing cherry red, almost like she was running a fever. But nah, she's just totally crushing on our boy. She scrambled to make up an excuse, blaming it on taking a super hot bath. Frey caught her by the arms right before she face-planted. For a split second, they locked eyes in this long, super intense stare. That's when he spotted her arms. They were completely covered in battle scars. Flustered, she snatched her arms away and tried to hide them. She froze in dead silence until Frey casually dropped that her scars actually looked badass. To him, they were proof of her insane grind, not some flaw to hide. Hearing that instantly melted all of Sonia's anxiety away. Isabel chimed in right then, asking where they were heading next. Sonia mentioned they were heading straight for the Herrera estate. The second she dropped that name, Frey and Isabel froze like statues. Their minds instantly flashed to Lord Ander, their old buddy from the academy. Ander Herrera once bragged that a girl from the Aquarit clan was on the short list to be his future wife. Now the pieces clicked. That girl was 100. Neither of them dared to say it out loud, though. Sir Luther chimed in, asking if they actually knew Ander Herrera. Isabel spilled the tea, explaining that Frey went to the exact same academy in the exact same year as the guy, and that Ander had flexed about the engagement. Super curious Frey tried to pry for more details about his bro's fiancé, but Sonia just looked totally lost, because the way he was grilling her sounded way more like an interrogation. Ultimately, Frey decided that lucky bastard Ander really hit the jackpot, bagging someone like her. A little while later, it was time to bounce. Isabel wished the young girl a safe trip. Sonia turned to Frey and begged him to swing by her fiancé's family estate once he wrapped up his current mission. He hesitated for a second, mulling over the random invite. Then he threw it out there that he might just crash the Herrera territory. Sonia flashed a massive beaming smile, promising she'd wait for him. After that, the duo trekked deep into the woods. Isabel pointed out how insane Frey's luck was to catch the eye of such a heavy-hitter family. Our guy shot back that Ander must have burned through all his good karma just to win Sonia over, before zoning out into his own thoughts. The thing is, Isabel was hyping up Frey, not Ander. And even after she set the record straight, he kept mercilessly roasting her. Finally, the squad hit their destination. The Schweitzer dungeon loomed in this absolutely nightmare-fuel location. Just looking at it sent chills straight down Isabel's spine. It totally lived up to the hype of the Hispania mountain. Freaky winged beasts swarmed the dungeon, flexing massive razor-sharp fangs. When the realization hit that they actually had to climb all the way up, sheer panic set in at the thought of clashing with those freaks. Frey quickly shut that down and pointed somewhere else. The girl let out a blood-curdling scream, but her partner was chilling like it was nothing. He was busy staring dead at the massive footprint of a dragon king. This thing was dozens of times bigger than them. The sheer shock knocked her completely off balance, sending her crashing down. She had literally never heard of a dragon being that insanely huge. Frey just snapped at her to get a grip. Literally anything could be lurking in the Hispania mountains. This place was straight up hell on earth. Then he casually fired off a quick spell. 1 second later, The girl was blasted right out of the way. Some colossal freak just swung an entire tree trunk right at them. The impact launched them both into the air, leaving them scrambling just to get back on their feet. Isabel was still way too dazed to process anything. Then, catching a glimpse of the hulking beast, it clicked. Frey had literally just saved her life. It was a terrifying nightmare-fuel ogre, straight out of the Hispania woods. As grateful as she was, Isabel couldn't help but think he could have at least given her a heads up before yeeting her across the dirt. Rocking blood-red skin and 3 freaky eyes, this thing was 100% a mutant. The bartender wasn't capping. Mutants were absolutely crawling all over these mountains. The monster was drooling and grinding its teeth in pure rage. It charged head-on at Isabel, but she was already charging up a spell. Isabel instantly conjured up a fireball and blasted the beast with a massive explosion. Frey was genuinely shook. She was packing way more firepower than he ever expected. Thick smoke clouded their vision, but the mutant was still standing tall. If anything, it looked even more pissed off. Not realizing her own raw power, she figured her attack was a total flop. This freakish mutant was practically fireproof, probably thanks to some messed up dragon DNA running through its veins. Surviving these deadly peaks meant switching tactics, and fast. Since fire was a total bust, they only had one card left to play. Ice. A bone-chilling frost ripped through the air, making Isabel shiver. Just summoning 2 tiny ice spears plunged the temperature straight into absolute winter. Watching him flex like this, Isabel couldn't help but see the legendary Great Mage Lucas standing right in front of her. Dead-focused Frey launched the icy projectiles straight at the beast. They slammed into its chest with pinpoint lightning-fast precision. A massive smirk wiped across Isabel's face. She totally thought, but their jaws dropped in absolute shock. The freak brushed off the attack and swatted them away with crazy, bone-crushing force. Even those hyper-lethal ice spears couldn't fully pierce its thick armor-like hide. As the raging troll bulldozed straight through the forest, a wave of pure panic hit Isabel. But Frey stayed completely, totally chill. Refusing to freeze up, she blasted a barrage of fireballs right into its ugly mug. But still, 0 damage. At least the fiery chaos gave them a split second to bolt. The massive brute totally... Frey finally admitted she was right. This mutant's flesh and bones were literally tougher than steel. With insane durability like that, the obvious move was to scorch it to ashes with high-tier fire spells. But Frey quickly reminded her, the beast was totally immune to flames. She then pitched burying the thing alive, using earthquake magic. The catch: dropping a massive, deafening spell like that would instantly aggro every single dragon in the area. Frey confidently smirked, claiming he had a specific armor-piercing trick up his sleeve just for this. He stepped out, taunting the monster to draw its deadly gaze. Then he casually spawned a fresh batch of ice spears. Isabel literally thought it was a useless joke, but Frey doubled down, claiming the secret was just never backing down. Shivering from the tension, it finally hit her. They might actually get wiped out right here. With a single hand, our guy locked in his stance. The troll went completely feral, charging them blindly with insane bloodlust. Bam! Frey sniped the first ice spear, drilling the grotesque creature right in the skull. Even while stumbling, the relentless tank kept pushing forward. Isabel started losing it, 100% sure this whole strat was a mega fail. But our boy stayed locked in, totally spamming the exact same spell. He launched a second spear, then a third. Number 4 slammed into the exact same pixel on its forehead. Yet somehow, this freak of nature refused to drop. It took 7 brutal stacked hits before the monster's legs finally started giving out. As the dying beast groaned in agony, Frey lined up spear number 8, aiming right for that cracked sweet spot. This time, the stacked damage utterly shattered its skull, punching clean through Isabel, basically collapsed, letting out a massive breath of relief. The crazy gamble actually paid off. Frey never doubted his insane magic out. That final strike absolutely nuked the creature's massive head, sending its heavy corpse crashing into the dirt. Throwing a playful smirk at Isabel, Frey flexed his catchphrase again. Consistency is always the ultimate cheat code. But mid-banter, a deafening roar forced their eyes to the sky. Massive dragons were already circling right above them. That blasted troll had accidentally dropped a massive beacon right on their exact coordinates. Now they had airborne nightmares to deal with. Catching a breath. Yeah, totally out of the question. A catastrophic explosion ripped through the area, showering the entire forest in scorching hellfire. Quick on his feet, Frey threw up a barrier, shielding both of them from the dragon's incinerating breath. They instantly sprinted for cover. Channeling her mana, Isabel crafted a razor-sharp ice arrow and sniped the beast right in its scaly neck. But that barely left a scratch. Suddenly a blinding blow. It was Frey. He rocketed into the sky, manifesting an absolutely massive ice javelin, designed to rip straight through the dragon's core. With ice in his veins, he coldly watched the monster's life fade out. His gaze was terrifyingly blank as he effortlessly swatted down another top-tier threat. He stuck a flawless landing, right as the overgrown lizard plummeted from the clouds. Isabel watched this absolute masterclass in pure stunned silence, but her awe shattered in an instant, because the boss fight hadn't even started. The mythical Dragon King slowly emerged from the crushed tree line. Before a single gasp could escape her lips, Frey clamped his hand over her mouth. They needed absolute dead silence. Tangling with the Dragon King right now, that was a guaranteed death sentence. Their only play was to hold their breath and pray it would just walk away. With glowing, predatory yellow eyes, the colossal tyrant scanned the shadows for its human prey. The duo froze like statues, not daring to breathe. Every earth-shattering footstep echoed closer and closer. But suddenly the Dragon King snapped its gaze to the horizon. It turned and stomped off, violently splintering. The moment he vanished, she could finally catch her breath. Just his lingering presence was enough to send shivers down anyone's spine. Absolutely anyone. Later on, our boy slumped against a boulder to recharge his mana, with Isabel sticking right by his side. She chipped in however she could. Before long, she had patched up every single scratch on him. A glowing butterfly fluttered down, gently resting on Frey's fingertip. After surviving that brutal gauntlet, his body and mind were finally clicking back into perfect sync. But the grind wasn't over just yet. They still had unfinished business in these mountains. He called out to Isabel, letting the little butterfly drift away. Mission priority number 1 right now. Tracking down Schweitzer's elusive dungeon. Locked in, they pushed toward the summit. Frey warned her to keep her guard all the way up, since Schweitzer was totally the type to rig the area with nasty monsters lurking down in the lake. Tilting her head, Isabel asked how he was so dead certain the hideout was even up here. He casually replied that he heard it straight from the man himself. Honestly, Schweitzer had a terrible habit of yapping way too much. Nestled right at the mountain's peak was a massive lake, cradling a tiny island, dead in the center. Step by grueling step, they finally made it. Stepping up to the shoreline, Isabel was totally blown away. The island looked unreal, surrounded by perfectly glassy, crystal-clear water, and bursting with lush greenery. Frey just muttered under his breath, calling his old friend a shameless bastard. Everything was suddenly clicking into place. Hiding right beneath that tiny patch of land was a labyrinth way bigger than the island itself. Frey broke it down for her. The island. It was literally just the front door. It looked totally low-key on the outside, but hiding something that massive was a total flex, just like Schweitzer always was. Isabel looked completely lost, having zero clue what he meant. They pushed forward under the blazing sky. Trekking across the island, they kept things totally quiet. Then, boom, they stumbled upon a colossal tree with a hollowed-out tunnel right in its trunk. Our guy knew instantly. This had to be the gateway down into the dungeon. Peering into the dark, a spiraling staircase plunged into the depths below. Glowing crystals bathed the walls in an eerie light as the duo crept down step by cautious step. Isabel nervously toyed with the idea of speaking up, but dreaded what kind of answer she might get. Swallowing her words, she just brushed the thought aside. So the heavy silence dragged on. Hitting the bottom of the stairs, they came face to face with something totally bizarre. A ridiculously massive doorway. Who knows what insane secrets were locked away behind it? Frey squinted at the massive slab, scanning it for any kind of unlocking mechanism. Meanwhile, Isabel just stared blankly. He calmly broke it down. This was a custom ward, cooked up by Schweitzer himself. Try to brute force your way in. Yeah, that's an instant death sentence. Without hesitating, he stepped right up to a glowing blue orb mounted nearby. Raising his hand, he tapped the surface, feeling the raw magic crackling inside. Instantly, thick smoke started billowing out, flooding the chamber. Isabel just watched the fog roll in, completely bewildered. Slowly, the mist began shaping itself into a human silhouette. Out of nowhere, a tiny, boyish figure materialized right in front of them, flashing a cheeky grin. The projection asked loud and clear if they could hear him. The kid gave off a totally weird vibe. Isabel glanced over, wondering if Frey actually knew this guy, but Frey, he was completely frozen in his tracks. She called out his name. Nothing. He was just standing there, visibly shaking. Meanwhile, the little boy cheerfully welcomed them to his grand mansion. Trembling Frey reached out to brush the kid's cheek, but his fingers just phased right through the air. It was a hologram, just a pre-recorded magic message, a simple welcome greeting. Hearing that voice again, Frey realized his old buddy was still as obnoxious and loud as he remembered. He could instantly tell the guy had used magic to make himself look way younger for the recording. But honestly, Frey was just so incredibly happy to see his face again, even if it was just an illusion. Isabel's jaw practically hit the floor. Her eyes went wide the second she realized this little kid was actually the legendary mage Schweitzer. Leaning in with a curious smirk, the glowing projection asked what brought them all the way down to his labyrinth. For a split second, it honestly felt like they could have a real conversation. But the illusion shattered. It was just a magical AI, hard-coded to spit out a few specific responses. The hologram boasted that this hidden vault held literally anything their hearts could ever desire. Frey choked up, almost asking how his best friend had died. But the recording cut him off, announcing there was one final trivia question they had to pass to get inside. It gave a smug warning, mess up even slightly, and you're locked down here for eternity. Frey felt a massive lump in his throat. That cocky tone, that arrogant smirk, it was 100% Schweitzer. It felt like the good old days had physically manifested in front of him. But the harsh reality hit hard. His voice could never reach his friend. He was totally alone now. Still, he flat out refused to accept he was the only survivor from their crew. Everyone he loved had been wiped out, while the absolute monsters who caused all this bloodshed were still out there running the world. When the dust settled, only his worst enemies were left standing. Isabel shifted nervously, totally spooked by the dark look washing over Frey's face. Wasting zero time, the hologram dropped the riddle. What is the one thing the great Schweitzer? The kid just stood there, flashing a cocky grin as he waited. Without missing a beat, Frey coldly spit out the answer. The demigods. His old buddy's hologram lit up cheerfully, confirming the answer was dead on. In a flash, the illusion dissolved into mist, and the massive stone doors slowly rumbled open. Isabel finally let out a massive sigh of relief. She scrambled to keep up with Frey, but that burning question still gnawed at the back of her mind. Catching her hesitation, Frey whipped around. She stepped up, opening her mouth to speak, but the words just completely choked in her throat. He gave her a beat to spit it out, but before she could even formulate a thought, he snapped at her to stop spacing out. They were plunging straight into the belly of the dungeon, and every shadow could be a deadly trap. Keep blanking out like an idiot, and you're gonna get yourself killed fast. Biting her tongue, Isabel swallowed her curiosity and took the harsh warning to heart. Pushing deeper into the ruins, Frey casually mentioned they'd soon find out whether the real gateway was lurking right ahead. It didn't take long before they hit another massive gate, identical to the first. Without missing a beat, Frey slapped his palm against the glowing blue orb. Plumes of smoke erupted from the crystal, twisting into a familiar silhouette. A second holographic projection of Schweitzer materialized. But this time, he looked significantly older. It was like every single door aged the guy by decades. The phantom dropped the second riddle, and it completely threw Frey off his game. The spirit strictly warned that they could only snatch one single item, and getting greedy would trigger the golem's absolute fury. One tiny slip-up meant instant death, so they had to tread incredibly lightly. Out of nowhere, the name Iris Fistfounder dropped. The younger version of Schweitzer ranted about how he never wrapped his head around that absolute menace of a woman, or how the heck witches even operated, while the rest of the crew was literally bleeding to save the world. She was busy catching feelings for some guy, completely tossing the mission out the window. Isabel shuddered. She knew Iris as the legendary Dark Witch. The girl was absolutely iconic for her pitch-black hair and drop-dead gorgeous looks. Basically, no dude could ever resist her vibe. Flashing back to his insanely charismatic old friend Frey, totally zoned out into his own memories. But the second the hologram roasted Iris for being a mess and called Lucas an even bigger disaster, Frey's expression instantly cracked. Young Schweitzer loudly complained that being the world's strongest mage meant literally nothing if Lucas was too totally clueless to notice Iris crushing on him hard. Frey just blinked, completely bewildered. That thought hadn't even crossed his mind once back in the day. Watching him, Isabel silently clocked it. Frey was just as hopelessly dense as Sir Lucas. The illusion roasted Lucas, saying even a brainless golem had more emotional intelligence, before circling back to the actual test. Iris had locked in contracts with 3 god-tier demons, and one packed a weapon, symbolizing total coexistence. Before the Phantom could even finish the prompt, Frey instantly fired back. Asura. Hearing the chime of success, Isabel's jaw practically hit the floor. The guy didn't even need the full question to nail the answer. Beyond the heavy gates lay a massive vault, absolutely overflowing with glittering loot and ancient relics. But they didn't linger long, quickly hitting the next checkpoint. The hologram of Schweitzer was sporting some serious gray hairs now as he delivered the third riddle. Isabel couldn't stop obsessing over this bizarre aging glitch. Why did each phantom look like it had aged a whole decade? The reality was actually super straightforward. This entire death trap was ripped straight from the pages of Schweitzer's personal journals. Frey instantly realized his old buddy wasn't exactly in his right mind when he designed this insane labyrinth. It felt like his brother-in-arms was desperately trying to leave behind a hidden message for someone very specific. Frey effortlessly crushed the third puzzle, popping the heavy doors wide open. The fourth riddle was basically a total breeze for him too. Strolling side by side down the eerie corridors, Isabel was low-key mind-blown that they were already blitzing through the fourth chamber. Our main guy found it seriously weird. Not a single quiz tested actual magic theory. They were all just insanely niche, hyper-personal trivia questions. But to Isabel, the fact that Frey casually had all the cheat codes to this guy's private life made him look completely sus. Before long, they rolled up to the final gate. The now fully elderly Schweitzer hologram calmly declared this was the absolute end of the line. Seeing his former best friend looking so frail, Frey's heart completely sank. The glowing spirit standing right there felt exactly like the brother he had desperately grieved for all these centuries. Without a single ounce of hesitation, the name Lucas Troman slipped right from the Phantom's lips. For a wild second, Frey swore he'd actually been recognized. The wise old illusion then proclaimed that his absolute greatest flex in life was getting to call Lucas his best friend. Staring back, Frey quietly admitted that he was just as incredibly proud to be Schweitzer's ride or die. Out of everyone from the old days, Schweitzer was the one he cherished the most. Meanwhile, Isabel just stood there staring, totally lost, trying to decode this intensely emotional exchange. The elderly Phantom waited in dead silence, letting the tension build, before, what is the true hidden name of Schweitzer Stroh? Bam. Suddenly it all made perfect. Locking eyes with the ghost of his past, Frey firmly delivered the real hidden name, Schweitzer Wilseman. Isabel's mind was absolutely blown by his impossible level of knowledge. The ancient spirit just beamed with pure pride as the colossal final doors finally rumbled open. He gently told Lucas to step inside. Everything hidden within this vault had been desperately, agonizingly prepared just for him. Frey desperately pleaded with the fading silhouette to hang on for just another second. Right before vanishing into thin air, Schweitzer dropped a massive bomb, entrusting Lucas to finish what he started. Frey lunged forward to stop him, but grabbed nothing but empty space. Meanwhile, Isabel's brain was totally short-circuiting. Did she hear that right? The legendary great sage Schweitzer literally just called Frey Lucas. Shaking off the shock, the duo finally stepped into the final chamber. Unlike the cold ruins outside, this room actually gave off cozy safe house vibes. Rifling through an ancient chest, our guy finally secured the exact loot he had been hunting for. He pulled out a sleek vial, swirling with a crystal-clear liquid. Isabel's jaw practically hit the floor when he casually dropped its name, the Frozen River. This mythical elixir was born deep inside the Wailing Cave. Get this, it literally takes 1,000 years just to form a single drop, and its power could completely supercharge a person's internal mana core, massively expanding their magical circuits. Just one drop is enough to boost an average human straight to a 4th-tier mage. Isabel was absolutely shell-shocked. Up until now, she swore the Frozen River was nothing but an old fairy tale. To shatter his limits and hit that legendary 7th-star tier, Frey absolutely needed that elixir. Isabel dug deeper into the chest, her eyes suddenly snagging on a pair of wildly colorful earrings. The second Frey spotted them, his entire face dropped. To Isabel, the jewelry just looked super tacky and totally out of style. But for some reason, Schweitzer had locked them away in this vault for centuries. These were the Typhon earrings, crafted by Frey's own hands. Isabel was completely blown away that he actually forged an artifact, epic enough to be stashed in the ultimate treasure room 4,000 years ago. He originally gifted them to Schweitzer back in the day, having literally zero clue his best bro had held on to them all this time. Isabel's vibe instantly shifted. She demanded answers. Staring right back, Frey debated if it was finally time to drop the ultimate truth bomb. Taking a deep breath, he decided to unmask his real identity. Isabel braced herself, hanging on to his every word. Staring her dead in the eye, he confessed, "I am Lucas Trauman." Isabel's brain practically short-circuited. 4 millennia ago, he and Schweitzer waged an all-out war against the demigod lord, earning him a brutal sentence of eternal darkness. Then out of nowhere, a desperate voice pierced through the endless void. It was the original Frey Blake, begging for power. He had absolutely no idea how their souls linked up or how their minds synced, but the SOS came through loud and clear. And just like that, Frey handed over the keys to his own body. Isabel just stood there, totally paralyzed, trying to process this insane lore drop. Her eyes darted around as the crazy reality sank in. She weakly asked if he was actually capping right now. The whole story sounded like straight-up fiction, but honestly she believed him. As wild as it sounded, it perfectly explained his overpowered stats. Glancing down at the earrings, all the puzzle pieces clicked. Dropping to one knee, she bowed to Lord Lucas and respectfully offered the artifacts back to their true owner. Frey just stared down at her intense loyalty. Snagging the Typhon earrings, he crouched down to meet her gaze and told her to drop the formalities. He was still just Frey to her. He needed her help to crush his ultimate goal, and that meant treating him exactly like she always did. In the dim glow of a single candle, you could practically see the hype radiating off Frey as he reclaimed his legendary gear. Meanwhile, Isabel kept digging and pulled out a super rare sensory amplifier. Frey casually dropped that these were Schweitzer's personal masterpieces. It wasn't just some flashy bracelet, though. It was actually a morphing staff the great sage wielded, like an extension of his own flesh. But there was a catch. One slip-up and this thing would siphon your mana dry and straight-up flatline you. Ignoring the red flags, she slapped it onto her wrist. She also equipped the Typhon earrings, and instantly, a massive shockwave of pure energy surged through her veins. Isabel was absolutely floored by Lucas's god-tier craftsmanship. The stat buff was off the charts. Now, she normally wasn't a fan of magical gadgets, but you don't just reject a gift from a legend. Digging further into the stash, her fingers brushed against something else. It was a fully charged golem core, bursting with raw mana. After tossing all the epic loot into Frey's inventory, their eyes locked onto Schweitzer's dusty desk. Sitting right there was an eternal mana candle, just another one of his quirky little inventions. Scanning the room, Isabel pointed out how the entire layout proved just how much Schweitzer genuinely cared about his best bro. Brushing the dust off, Frey gently flipped open a weathered journal resting on the table. The ink on the page literally made his blood run cold. The bookmarked entry hit him like a truck. Lucas vanished. Reading further down, Schweitzer confessed his theory that only Lucas himself possessed the sheer power to just wipe his own existence off the map, without leaving a single trace. The diary dumped all the heavy lore of what went down after the disappearance, logging the savage clash between Kassajan, the magic warrior king, and Lucid the sword king, not to mention the sketchy out-of-nowhere disappearance of Iris. With the demigod's toxic grip choking the entire continent, Schweitzer had basically lost faith in humanity entirely. Even the fakes who hyped him up in public were secretly plotting the great sage's downfall behind his back. The entries painted a gritty picture of the relentless, blood-soaked battles he survived day in and day out. Lucas swallowed hard, reading about the crushing isolation his best friend tanked just to protect everyone. Back then, Lucas Trauman was the ultimate alpha, the one guy absolutely nobody could replace. And the harder Schweitzer tried to solo carry that massive burden, the more painfully obvious it became that he was in way over his head. Listening to this tragic backstory, Isabel completely broke down. Despite putting everything on the line, Schweitzer's final entry was, he was begging for forgiveness because in the very end, he failed. Those devastating words hit our overpowered hero like a critical strike. Fighting back tears, Lucas just couldn't accept that his absolute best friend had. Watching him shoulder that massive burden, she scrambled for the right words to comfort him. I mean, after the absolute hell he had survived in this lifetime, he knew exactly how suffocating that kind of isolation could be. But Frey wasn't about to back down. He vowed to carry his friend's legacy and that soul-crushing weight himself. with pure, unadulterated rage blazing in his eyes. He swore to wipe every last demigod off the face of the earth. He turned away dead silent, but Isabel caught something off. There was still one final page left in that journal. The ink spelled out a final mission. Whoever finds this must complete Anastasia. Schweitzer had literally dumped his entire life's work straight into Anastasia, his ultimate masterpiece. Isabel was totally lost, but Frey was already digging through his bag. He pulled something out, and the two of them just stared at it. Boom. Schweitzer's magnum opus. Anastasia. As they trekked back, the glowing crystals lit up the dark cavern. Grinding up those stairs, they examined the gem. It wasn't just a rock, it was a literal golem core. Schweitzer was a top-tier puppet master, but honestly, even Frey had no clue what Anastasia really was capable of. Then it clicked for Isabel. She looked over, totally curious. Could you actually finish the golem with that core? Suddenly, an ancient memory hit Frey like a truck. He froze right there on the steps. His mind flashed back to the old days, visualizing this super janky, blocky-looking golem that looked absolutely goofy. Schweitzer was dying of laughter, straight up roasting Lucas's golem, calling it pathetic and telling him to just scrap the whole thing. He joked that next time Lucas should just beg him for help, bragging he could build a better one with 0 hands. The dude was trolling him so hard, he was literally gasping for air. Annoyed as hell, a young Lucas just spawned a fireball and yeeted it straight at his face. That bittersweet memory left a heavy lump in Frey's throat. Snapping back to reality, he fished another item out of his bag. If we finish this, we might unlock the missing history. Isabel tilted her head. Missing history. He broke it down. The missing history was the massive blind spot. Everything that went down while he was locked away in the abyss. A second later, he slammed on the brakes again. His expression hardened into pure ice. Standing behind him, Isabel whispered, "Why are we stopping?" "The second we clear this cave," he ordered, his voice dead serious, "you sprint for the village. Don't look back." High up above the crags, dragons were already circling, hunting for fresh meat. The second they crested the mountain peak, the air turned suffocatingly thick. Pure terror washed over Isabel's face. Waiting for them was the Dragon King himself. Frey stared down the massive beast, cold and unfazed. The monster glared right back, practically foaming at the mouth for a rematch. Oh, it is about to go down. Recognizing the beast's deadly intellect, Frey called out, asking if the big boss was waiting just for him. The Dragon King actually looked amused by this tiny human. Emitting a low, earth-shaking rumble, it bragged that it had been waiting since the very second the boy stepped foot into the domain of the almighty Torkunda, meaning this giant lizard had been tracking their scent all the way back in the forest. Isabel glanced at Frey, and for the first time, he actually sounded on edge. The Titan chuckled, flashing a wicked row of razor-sharp teeth. It purposely camped the dungeon exit, knowing full well that humans always walked out loaded with shiny loot. That little flex instantly made Frey think back to the frozen river. Torkunda was literally using his best friend's resting place as a massive bait trap to farm humans and grind XP. The sacred sanctuary Schweitzer valued more than his own heartbeat, reduced to a twisted feeding trough for a greedy, oversized lizard. Frey's blood boiled. He snarled that Torkunda was overdue for a violent reality check. The colossal beast actually flinched at the sheer disrespect. It just stared at him in stunned silence. But Frey drew the line in the sand. If the lizard even breathed in Isabel's direction, he would slaughter him. Torkunda narrowed its massive glowing eyes. It despised the deadly confidence radiating from the boy. Right before the chaos kicked off, Frey barked at Isabel one last time to run for her life, but she flat out refused to budge. She knew damn well he wasn't 100% sure he could survive this. To the Dragon King, these stubborn humans were just premium-tier snacks. With volatile energy sparking and swirling inside its massive jaws, it declared it was prime time for a double-course meal. Frey snatched Schweitzer's staff, instantly slammed down a stone wall spell, and ricocheted a brutal counterattack straight at the beast's face. Torkunda took the hit head-on, but it barely even scratched its scales. And Isabel. She was just standing there in the crossfire, doing a whole lot of nothing, literally channeling massive Sakura energy. Frey snapped. He screamed at her that she was pure dead weight, and that she was doing nothing but dragging him down. Hearing those harsh words, hot tears instantly welled up in her eyes. But she finally got the message, spinning around and booking it out of there, swearing she would bring backup. Meanwhile, Torkunda was already charging up his next nuke, unhinging his massive jaw to engulf Frey in a tidal wave of pure hellfire. Frey barrel rolled out of the way, shooting straight into the clouds. He whipped his head around, only to find the massive dragon riding his tail. The beast's thunderous wings propelled it right toward him. Frey fired off another hex mid-flight, but his current vessel was still painfully frail, leaving him barely scraping by the monster's next lethal strike. Out of nowhere, the sky filled with a new nightmare. A whole squad of lesser drakes swarmed his only escape route. Channeling his earrings and staff, he conjured a barrage of jagged ice spears. He then cranked his mana into overdrive, whipping up a violent cyclone. Those overgrown lizards never even saw it coming. A split second later, the gale ripped through them. The brutal combo shredded the ambush right out of the sky. Some beasts were sliced clean in two, while the rest crashed down critically mangled. Drifting through the clouds, Frey watched them plummet, but sweeping up the underlings wasn't going to win him this war. He needed to slay the boss. Just as he braced himself, Torkunda lunged forward. Frey just needed 3 seconds. 3 seconds to finish charging up a massive explosive hex. Mid-chant, he watched the gigantic drake closing the gap insanely fast. Still, the spell was practically locked and loaded. The timing clicked right into place for a light detonation. A blinding shockwave nuked the entire skyline. Raging hellfire swallowed the giant iguana whole. Hovering in the smoke, our guy waited for the dust to settle. It was a ridiculously smart, hard-hitting strike. Even the monster seemed stunned that Frey actually weaponized its own insane momentum against it, but pure skill wasn't going to cut it here. The Drake King mocked him, claiming that blast didn't even tickle. Reality crashed down on Frey. He was in deep trouble, with 0 escape routes. Torkunda towered right in front of him, while a whole new swarm of dragons boxed him in from behind. Pinned in this death trap, survival felt impossible. His absolute last resort. The frozen river elixir. He flashed back to Isabel, questioning why he was holding off on drinking it. But that potion wasn't just some casual power-up. Even a grand mage like him needed at least 7 days to tame its wild energy, and camping out in that cursed forest for that long, with 0 food or water, was basically a death sentence. Writing it off as total suicide, Frey had shelved the idea, choosing to rely solely on his own raw grit. Scanning the chaotic skies, his eyes desperately locked onto the Drake King. But he spotted the real threat way too late. Torkunda lunged, jaws wide open, ready to swallow him whole. Staring straight down the beast's razor-sharp throat, he knew it was game over. Suddenly, a massive force slammed brutally into the Dragon King. For a split second, Frey was totally clueless about who just bailed him out. She was absolutely wrecking every drake that dared to step up, ruthlessly snatching them right by their throats. There was 0 chance she'd let anything happen to Frey Blake, the guy who gave her a second chance at life. With one explosive tackle, she smashed 2 more, lesser drakes, out of the sky. The blazing phoenix was glowing with pure vitality. Locking eyes with Frey, you could see nothing but deep respect. But the ultimate boss was still standing. Frey was completely shook. He was still out of options. Knowing full well that the flaming bird stood no chance against the Drake King, he desperately yelled at her to run, but she was already charging up her ultimate attack. As she dive-bombed, Torkunda unleashed his full, terrifying might. The 2 titans collided midair like a meteor strike. Yet for Torkunda, that explosive impact was practically nothing. Frey knew the giant beast possessed an insane immunity to all fire magic. It made him the absolute worst possible matchup for a phoenix. Panicking, he screamed for her to retreat, but the fierce bird didn't flinch. She knew the stakes from the very start, and she was sacrificing herself to buy him time. Her blazing eyes screamed at him to run while he still had the chance. But Lucas Troman was never the type to just tuck tail and run from a fight. Still, trapped in this vessel, he was painfully powerless. Yet deep down, he knew he couldn't keep blaming this fragile shell, or the fact that magic had decayed over the last 4,000 years. What he was truly missing right now was pure guts and resolve. Muttering a heavy apology to the fiery bird, he realized he owed her big time. Honoring her final wish, he fell back toward the dungeon entrance, no matter what went down. Next, this brutal lesson was burned into his mind. Death is always lurking right around the corner. Begging the phoenix to just hold the line a little longer, he downed the entire frozen river elixir. Smashing the empty vial against the stone floor, he instantly felt his very DNA shifting. His face contorted in agony, pupils blowing wide open as they faded to pitch black. Suddenly, Frey's hair started bleeding out, its color turning snow white. An unbearable tsunami of pain ripped through his fragile veins as the elixir's raw, chaotic power hit him like a freight train. His eyes sparked with a vicious new color as a blood-curdling roar ripped from his lungs. The demonic energy locked inside him finally erupted violently. It was super clear this forbidden potion was mutating him in the most brutal way possible. Meanwhile, up in the sky, Torkunda finally recognized the blazing bird as that exact same divine beast who slipped right through his claws before. In his twisted mind, today was the exact day this firebird would burn out forever. Sure, the human looked like a tasty little snack, but devouring that phoenix's life force, now that was the ultimate 5-star feast he was craving. Boiling with rage, flashbacks of their legendary showdown hit him like a freight train. High up on the peak, Torkunda locked his sights on the phoenix, desperately clawing for survival. He was dead set on turning this majestic beast into his next meal. But even dripping with blood, the fiery bird straight up refused to back down. Pushing past her limits, she unleashed one final, desperate spell, engulfing the entire battlefield in a massive blazing inferno. But Torkunda just smirked. Struggling was pointless. That is until the smoke cleared, and he realized the pesky bird had pulled a total vanishing act. Whatever. The Dragon King knew patience always paid off. He was absolutely hyped for round 2, knowing their paths would cross again real soon. Boom! Deafening shockwaves ripped through the forest, violently snapping massive trees in half like they were toothpicks. The brutal impact had launched the phoenix deep into the woods. Battered, bruised, and totally drained, her tank was completely on zero. Slumped by the waterfall, she was barely clinging to life. Our boy took one look and instantly knew this bird had just tangled with an absolute monster. Her trembling eyes silently begged for a lifeline. Seeing that shattered pride, Frey made a hardcore vow to step up and save her. The scene hit him with a brutal wave of nostalgia. Eons ago, his absolute best bro had been exactly like this. A fiercely proud, breathtaking phoenix. Triggered by his words, the bird dragged herself up for round 2 against the Dragon King. She launched into the air, ruthlessly swiping her talons straight for his face. Torkunda snapped his jaws at the annoying pest, violently swatting the blazing bird away like a fly with a brutal tail whip. Her agonizing shriek echoed through the air. Meanwhile, Frey was sweating bullets, desperately wrestling to control the overwhelming power of the frozen river. He knew the grind would be tough, but not this insane. Racked with mind-numbing pain, he mentally begged Schweitzer for forgiveness, terrified he was about to fumble this second chance at life. He cursed his own cocky, arrogant mindset. His mana was completely tapped out, and his willpower was crumbling under the elixir's sheer intensity. But then, a total game changer. A soothing, incredibly warm aura washed over him, slowly booting his system back online. Isabel was right there by his side, pumping her own magic into him to keep him stable. She had even clutched up with food and water to help him digest that insanely chaotic ice energy. That is when it clicked. She did not run away. She braved the dangerous village purely to keep him alive. With a heartbreakingly soft voice, she confessed her biggest fear, being left behind. It hit Frey right in the feels. Only in this second life had he truly tasted how toxic absolute isolation could be. Lost and questioning her own existence in this twisted world, she tearfully admitted that he was her one and only safe space. After hearing that, how could he ever claim to be a lone wolf? Even while struggling to survive herself, she was going all out to carry him. Right before the biting frost completely hijacked his nervous system, he flashed her a warm smile, and in that fraction of a second, the missing puzzle piece finally snapped into place. It was not some edgy, lone wolf courage or raw willpower he was lacking. It was trust. The unbreakable bond of protecting those who were still breathing. Meanwhile, right next door, a colossal clash of the titans was popping off. The oversized iguana and the spicy chick. Suddenly, the fanged raid boss sensed a massive shift in the vibe. A bone-chilling, absolutely terrifying wave of ice magic started flooding the entire arena. Channeling every last drop of her mana, the Phoenix loaded up for one explosive, all-or-nothing ultimate strike. She went full kamikaze mode, diving straight at the behemoth and gouging out his eye, sending the dragon into a screaming, blinded rampage. Retaliating hard, Torkunda sank his massive fangs deep into the flaming bird. Molten feathers exploded everywhere as the savage deathmatch leveled up. Honestly, even he was shook that this supposed underdog had the absolute audacity to permanently scar the mighty Torkunda. Their impact violently cratered the earth. Literally seeing red, the dragon locked his remaining eye onto his fiery prey, ready to end it all. Cut back to Frey. Even while knocking on death's door, the guy was smirking like a maniac. Despite the literal hell he was in, that arrogant, hopeful grin never vanished. Suddenly, a massive fissure violently ripped the ground apart, spewing out raw, concentrated power that blasted the dragon right in the jaw. The critical hit connected, but this raid boss was not about to flinch. He instantly squared up, winding back for a leap. Dust and shattered rocks completely blanketed the zone. That is when the beast realized he had totally underestimated the threat level. This was life or death. Something seriously crazy was brewing deep inside the cave. Blinding beams of light erupted everywhere, instantly catching the attention of the airborne mob swarms. Boom! Flash frozen mid-flight. Those terrifying rays locked them in solid ice. A second later, the frozen statues shattered into a million sparkling pieces. Torkunda, still kicking, hovered ominously over the battlefield. But wait, for the first time in literally millennia, the ancient apex predator felt a sudden urge to rage quit and run. The moment that menacing, overpowered shadow stepped out of the portal, pure dread hijacked the dragon's brain. He instantly pulled a 180 and noped out of there at supersonic speed. He was absolutely mauling. How on earth was he terrified of a puny little human? It did not matter how cracked this new challenger seemed. A squishy mortal should just be a squishy mortal. Still, his survival instinct screamed at him to lay low and heal up that busted eye before diving back in. But then plot twist, the human practically teleported onto his massive wing, leaving the giant lizard totally flabbergasted. Our boy casually started spamming magical arrows at point-blank range. Torkunda shrieked in absolute agony as the explosive impacts blew him straight out of the sky, arrows buried deep in his scales. Pure rage erupted from his core. Even riddled with holes, the beast tore itself free, winding up for another strike without missing a beat. But the human was already gone. Frey knew a monster that ancient shouldn't just rely on a single eye. Suddenly, Frey materialized right in the dragon's blind spot. Frost magic flared up, locking in for another devastating hit. A brutal blast shattered Torkunda's remaining eye. It only fueled the monster's absolute meltdown. He hurled massive boulders at his target, but they blew up into dust before even getting close. Barking out a psychotic laugh, the beast started flexing about his past kills. But honestly, you could see the sheer panic creeping into his gaze. He didn't even notice his tail snapping shut in solid ice. And then the guy showed up again, gliding like a ghost through the rubble. The Titan was seriously starting to question his own reality right now. His brain was short-circuiting over whether this dude was actually human at all. Glaring down at him, the creature let out a heavy, rattling breath, totally rattled and ticked off. He desperately needed to know who he was messing with. Flapping his massive wings, he closed the distance. Isabel was paralyzed with fear. Without even looking back, Frey warned her to stay exactly where she was. Then he charged up another freezing barrage. He straight up mocked the Titan, asking if that was seriously his ultimate flex. Torkunda unhinged his jaw, ready to wipe him off the map. A puny mortal packing frost magic shouldn't have stood a ghost of a chance against that savage roar. Unleashing pure hellfire, the dragon tried to melt him alive. But Frey held his ground, throwing up an absolute wall of ice. The girl could barely shield herself. The shockwave was so insane, it literally shook the mountains. Flames and frost slammed together in a blinding blast. The beast's roar cranked up to a deafening volume, yet it still couldn't crack that freezing barrier. The monster pushed forward, giving it everything he had, watching in pure dread. Isabel panicked, thinking Frey was actually going to lose, as the deadly pressure kept skyrocketing. She was completely useless here, left to just helplessly watch the nightmare unfold. Then she noticed Frey was gone. Torkunda roared in triumph, trash-talking his enemy like a worthless bug, until his instincts screamed that something was terribly off. Isabel saw it too. A sudden, terrifying chill brushed against the Titan's throat. Frey had shadow-stepped right behind him, slicing clean through Torkunda's neck with an icy blade. It was finally over. The dragon's lifeless body crashed down into the dirt. For Isabel, it was a total blur. Staring blankly at the massive corpse, it hit her that her partner had just slaughtered a legendary beast, and he wasn't even going all out. Suddenly, he plummeted from the sky. Dropping like a stone, the girl managed to catch him mid-air. His skin was practically made of ice. His one and only demand was to be carried straight to the Phoenix. Gliding through the air, Isabel kept hyping him up, completely mind-blown by what he just pulled off. He just brushed it off calmly, saying the ancient dragon honestly lacked the raw combat IQ to take him down. He pointed out that stepping on weak humans and surviving an actual war zone were two totally different games. Raw horsepower alone is never going to cut it against the real apex predators. His entire strategy was to bait the dragon into thinking that explosive clash drained his tank, when it was actually just 80% of his mana. Holding back that final 20% let him blink behind Torkunda and manifest that frost scythe. She had to admit that was some next-level trickery. Glowing phoenix feathers littered the battlefield. The warrior stared in quiet grief as tears welled up in the girl's eyes. The majestic bird had already taken its final breath. Heartbroken, he gently stroked its feathers, thanking the creature for saving his life. But out of nowhere, the ashes started to spark. Frey was about to jumpstart its revival, using his own raw power. Torkunda's massive corpse was resting right beside the bird. The residual hellfire inside the dragon's core was violently being siphoned straight into the phoenix. Running on that stolen fuel, the bird was bound to rise again. With Torkunda dead, the valley's remaining dragons would completely tear each other apart, fighting for the throne. Which meant the phoenix had to become the new alpha. That way his buddy's dungeon would never have to deal with another oversized boss iguana throwing a tantrum. Passing the torch to the fiery bird Frey softly mentioned, he hoped their paths would cross again. Cutting back to Kausifin village, the vibes were perfectly peaceful. Locals were bustling through the marketplace, completely carefree. Frey was chilling on a bench nearby, just quietly reflecting on everything he'd been through. Then someone brought up a scheduled boat reservation. Squeezing a fresh juice, the young girl flat out told him there wasn't a single ship sailing out today. Chilling on the ship post-battle, he was feeling pretty decent, though the guy seriously needed to bulk up a bit. That loot from Torkunta's nest, absolutely clutch. Same goes for the salamander cloak. She tapped the spatial bag stuffed with their hard-earned drops. No way was Frey letting his buddy's gear just rot away back there. The two just sat there zoning out and sipping passion fruit juice. This whole trip dragged on for so long that thinking about the upcoming semester made it feel like literal years had passed. Plot twist, it had only been a single week. Touching down in Hispaniola, Isabel was second-guessing if crashing at Ander Herrera's place was actually a smart move. But hey, they were stuck there for another day anyway, since no ships were rolling out. The second they pulled up to the main gate, they were totally caught off guard. Some beefy guard stepped up demanding to know their business. Frey casually asked if Ander was around, claiming they were buddies. Smirking like he was dealing with some random punk kid, the guard practically ordered him to drop a name. He just deadpanned Frey Blake. Instantly a memory clicked for the guard. His young master had hyped up the third son of the Blake family hardcore. If Frey ever showed up, they were ordered to treat him like straight-up royalty. The exact second that name dropped, the guard completely froze, totally shook. This was literally his master's one and only best friend. Right on cue, a fancy carriage rolled up. Another guard called out that the young lady was back. Frey and Isabel whipped around to see who was stepping out. They hung back by the ride. The door swung open, and out stepped a gorgeous girl. Enter Lady Lilia. The guards instantly stiffened up like boards at her arrival. Sweating, they reported that the guy standing there was claiming to be the young master's VIP buddy. Lilia sized the boy up from top to bottom. Her pale eyes held this quiet, heavy sadness. Flashing a polite smile, she mentioned her brother wouldn't shut up about Mr. Frey. She even clocked the girl standing next to him, Lady Isabel. Isabel was so starstruck, she was left completely speechless. Pivoting back toward her ride, she introduced herself as Lilia Herrera Ander's little sister. Neither of the two moved a muscle. Isabel and I are so utterly blinded by Lilia's insane visuals that we straight up forget how to breathe. The totally mortified guard stumbled over his words, trying to excuse why they hadn't verified the guests yet. But Lilia wasn't having it, shooting him a freezing glare to make it crystal clear those stuffy formalities were unnecessary. The dude took the hint instantly. Bowing fast, he frantically apologized for his attitude. With that sorted, the carriage cruised forward into the estate. Even after crossing the massive gates, this property was so ridiculously huge that the main house wasn't even in sight. Inside, Lilia quietly kept her eyes glued to the weird new guy. She just couldn't wrap her head around why he was staring holes into her earlier. Catching her gaze, Frey casually asked if she had something on her mind. She blurted out that he looked absolutely nothing, like her brother's descriptions, especially rocking that icy silver hair. Gesturing to his head, Frey just sighed, saying it had been a wildly chaotic trip. Lilia giggled, telling him to drop the stiff formal act, so Frey instantly switched to chill casual talk. Naturally, Isabel chewed him out for being too relaxed. Leaning in, Lilia asked for the tea on how her brother acted back in the academy. Frey shrugged, admitting he didn't know much since Ander was 2 years his senior. Lilia slyly pointed out that Frey wasn't that much older than her either. Meanwhile, Isabel was practically begging him to mind his manners, considering they were literal guests crashing at the Herrera family mansion. They finally pulled up to the insanely massive manor. The ride dropped them off right by a grand fountain, where Ander was already chilling in the garden. Lighting up, he dapped Frey up, joking about how long he'd been waiting for this guy to show up. The two bros instantly clicked back into their old dynamic, cracking up and throwing playful jabs. It didn't take long for Ander to spot Frey's whole new silver-haired aesthetic, running on fumes. Frey groaned that he was starving to death. Watching from the sidelines, Lilia was stunned. She had never in her entire life seen her brother smile with so much genuine joy. Pouting, she cut into their broment, whining that her brother was totally sidelining her. Ander just ruffled her hair, calling her his little princess. Big mistake that only triggered her more. The dude hadn't even acknowledged her existence until that exact second, so she whipped around and stormed into the... Ander just laughed it off, saying his sister triggered over the dumbest things and was a total headache. Honestly, Frey thought it was way weirder that Ander could unironically call his sister a princess without cringing out of his mind. Heading inside, the conversation shifted to Frey's upcoming raid into the Hell Mountains. Out of nowhere, Ander smirked and asked if he'd saved his fiancée yet, leaving Frey totally clueless. Jumping in, Isabel clarified that they were talking about Lady Sonia. Hearing that Sonia made it back alive and well felt like a massive weight off Frey's chest. That girl had been grinding her sword skills around the clock, unlocking the title of Storm at a crazy young age, through pure, sweaty hustle. Her blade work was god tier. She was built tough, rocking insanely powerful arms to match her vibe. Shoveling food into his mouth, Frey mumbled that the whole situation was just a tragic waste. Can't believe a total 10 like her is stuck with such a loser. Paran looks a little salty about it, but he brushes it off and gets straight to business. He breaks down. The strict family tradition guests gotta pay their respects to the head of the household before doing anything else. They halt in front of massive double doors, bracing themselves to meet his old man. Stepping inside the room absolutely screams old money, dripped out in ridiculous luxury. Even the teacups and silverware look like they cost a down payment on a house. The whole squad is already at the table, just waiting to dig into the feast. Two blonde dudes shoot each other a side-eye. Lilia is casually housing a piece of cake, while the woman next to her elegantly sips her steaming tea. Another maid is on constant refill duty. The patriarch drops a polite, "Nice to meet you, Frey," before immediately asking how Count Blake is doing. Frey forces out a light chuckle, smoothly lying that the guy is doing just fine. Deep down, he figures this guy probably never even crossed paths with the original Frey's dad. Doesn't really matter though, since he's just piloting this borrowed body. Suddenly, the vibe in the room gets insanely heavy as all eyes snap straight to the patriarch. Shepherd June and is one of the Empire's 5 elite 7-star mages. Plus, he totally runs the 4th magic tower. Frey's mind races, could this powerhouse actually know something about the demigod? Swirling his teacup, Shepherd casually mentions how the 6th magic tower is practically in the middle of nowhere. Because of that crazy distance, he only ever bumped into Count Blake once a year at their annual tower summits. He sighs, adding that he totally misses those good old days they spent catching up. Meanwhile, Frey zeroes in on the strange mark slapped across the man's face. He is dead certain that is Schweitzer's iconic, one-of-a-kind magic tattoo. Breaking the silence, Shepherd lays on the gratitude, saying he is incredible that Frey had his son's back and saved his fiancée. But then the interrogation drops what exactly dragged Frey out to the treacherous Hispania Mountains. Frey plays it cool and super vague, tossing out a generic, just handling some personal business. He brushes it off, claiming it was way too boring to even waste the guy's time talking about. Surprisingly, Shepherd drops it. He completely pivots the conversation, asking how the massive banquet prep is shaping up. Paran steps up confidently reporting that everything is totally on track. He volunteers to personally handle the VIP's gotta grind that real-world networking experience for his future, right? He hits them with a crisp bow, locking in the mission. The second Paran is done. Shepard locks eyes right back onto Frey. He mentions he's been deep diving into some complex spell and wants Frey's take on it. Frey fakes some hesitation, playing the "oh, my current skills probably aren't top tier enough to help" card. But Shepard pushes back, claiming he just needs that fresh, younger mage perspective. Frey quietly braces himself for the real test. Catching the vibe, Paran stands up, announcing he is heading down to the banquet hall. Seizing the opening, Frey tells Isabel to tag along. Boom. Now it is just the two of them left at the table. Shepard shatters the silence, slowly dropping his full name, Frey Blake. Frey doesn't even flinch, staring him dead in the eye. The Patriarch's eyes literally flash a different color as he ruthlessly demands to know why Frey is masking his true endgame. He barks out a demand to know exactly what he is planning. Inside, Frey instantly goes rigid, a single cold drop of sweat tracing down his cheek. Shepard glares at him with pure, unfiltered disgust. He snarls, demanding to know why the hell the Trauman rings dared to step foot on his turf. Frey dodges the bullet, acting totally confused and claiming there has got to be a massive mix-up. But Shepard scoffs, calling him pretty slick for manipulating Paran to pull off his sketchy little stunt. And honestly, he calls Frey wildly arrogant for blatantly flexing that artifact right to his face. Absolutely nothing. Suddenly it clicks in Frey's brain. Oh snap. This guy is talking about the Typhon earrings. Tapping the glowing jewel, Frey looks genuinely baffled. Up until this exact second, he completely thought the Trauman rings was just some dorky magic club back at the academy that Paran ran. Still, he hits him with a hard deny, smoothly stating he just looted these earrings out in the Hispania Mountains. Now Shepard is the one glitching out. He squints, asking if Frey seriously isn't secretly linked to that underground squad. Frey shakes his head. Nope. He admits Paran tried to recruit him once, but he completely ghosted the offer because he absolutely despises being leashed to any faction. Bam Shepard slams his fist onto the table, barking that he isn't talking about Paran's stupid little school club. But then he just freezes mid-rant. Scanning Frey top to bottom, he finally realizes this kid is literally just a clueless wanderer. Looking awkward as hell, the Patriarch clears his throat and tells him to stand down. Frey just chills in his seat, softly smirking as he low-key roasts the older man for the whole dramatic misunderstanding. Ouch. That definitely stings the big guy's massive ego even more. Still, Frey keeps his cool, repeating that he's strictly here to hang with a bro. Shepard's eyes narrow into slits again. Frey doubles down he came to chill with a close friend, and he literally had zero plans to cross paths with the intimidating Shepard. Meanwhile, cut to the banquet hall where the staff is throwing the final Seeing the tension finally evaporate, Shepard drops his hostile tone. He is definitely not 100% sold on trusting Frey yet, but he is willing to give the kid a chance. Still, he desperately needs answers about Frey's shady past and starts pressing him for the real truth. Who does Frey think actually pulls the strings across the continent? He guesses that out of all the human nations, the Cascow Empire has got to be the top dog. But even they only claim a measly 10% of the globe. Frey just gives a quiet, knowing nod. If the continent's total power was 10 fingers, humanity barely holds 3. He knows damn well there's another boss in town, some hidden god-tier entity, pulling the puppet strings from the pitch black. His hands stay completely still under the table, as Shepard echoes that exact same thought. There is Shepard drops the bomb. A demigod. That single word sends a massive jolt through Frey. But Shepard keeps going, painting a picture of some half-divine freak of nature, way beyond human limits. The ultimate apex predator lurking behind our whole society. It sounds like straight-up delusion, but Frey knows for a fact these monsters exist. His heart pounding, a crazy smirk creeps onto his face. His mind flashes back to the squad of 5 who actually threw hands with the demigod back in the day. After 4,000 years, he figured the demigod was basically running the server again, with humanity completely clueless to the dark truth. Yet against all odds, real ones like Shepard are still out here, and their numbers are slowly stacking up. Anyone who knows about the demigod is someone who flat out refuses to fold. Totally lost Shepard asks why the heck he's grinning like a maniac. For the first time since his insane respawn, Frey actually feels a spark of real hope. He casually admits he knows all about the demigods. Still, He tells Shepard to chill out, because he's still not 100% sure they can actually team up. He intentionally keeps his true identity locked down tight, but he drops a massive flex claiming he's personally read Schweitzer's hidden notes. Hearing that legendary name makes Shepard instantly flare up with rage. Frey doesn't even blink. The two just lock eyes in a deadly silent stare down. Cooling off, Shepard says he really hopes Frey spills everything he knows. He straight up admits they are totally in the dark about the demigods, and they aren't even 100% sure the bastards are real. The absolute only thing they know for a fact is that these freaks pack enough firepower to wipe every single living creature off the face of the earth. Frey breathes a heavy sigh of relief that Shepard at least gets the most crucial detail. There can't be a massive army of them, probably fewer than 100 total. Even so, every single one is basically a walking nuke. Then the Patriarch dives deep into a piece of lore from 4,000 years ago. An elite squad of 5 heroes actually stepped up to brawl with the demigods. You had Schweitzer, the great sage Kassadin, the magic warrior king, Lucid, the sword king, Iris the black witch, and the absolute goat Lucas Troman, the great mage. But the second the great mage vanished from the map, the entire timeline shattered. The warrior king and the sword king went their separate ways. The black witch completely wiped her own existence from the records. Only the great sage kept throwing hands until the bitter end, but he just couldn't solo the demigod. And just like that, their legendary names faded into ancient myths. The two men stay locked in a heavy stare down across the wood, just like Schweitzer's lost notes. Shepard actually holds the missing pieces of modern history. He claims his secret circle straight up inherited the burning will of those fallen heroes. In reality, though, they're fractured and scattered all over the continent. As time dragged on, that epic legacy cracked and shattered, trapping them in a super toxic stalemate where everyone is just policing each other. Frey rolls his eyes internally, thinking this is exactly what goes down the second more than 2 people get involved. Everything just turns into messy politics. The heavy-hitter factions out there are Stroh's necklaces, Fisfounder's bracelets, and Lucid's swords. Frey instantly clocks that these guilds are flexing his old squad's names, but he's still in the dark about Kassadin and his own legacy. Shepard drops the bad news that Troman's rings are completely down bad, and their guildmaster might actually be dead. As for Kassadin, his Magic Warrior King title only ever gets passed down to one single absolute unit at a time. But nobody has a clue where the current heir is hiding. And even though they share the exact same name, this hardcore underground circle has zero connection to that lame academy club. Shepard brushes off the school club as just a pet project some random students slapped together, purely on a whim. Whenever they spot a crazy talented prodigy on campus, they instantly try to poach them for their real squad. Plus, having these fake fanboy groups running around with the same name makes the perfect smokescreen to keep the real killers totally off the grid. Pouring Frey a glass of wine, Shepard flat out admits he has zero clue just how massive the demigod's spy network really is. A chill runs down Frey's spine as he realizes this exact conversation could be bugged by them right now. Shepard totally assumed Frey was a die-hard loyalist to Troman's rings, all because he was rocking Typhon's earrings, the ancient legendary relic belonging to Lucas himself. Wrapping things up, Shepard says that's literally all the intel he can drop for now. Then he completely sizes Frey up, burning with curiosity, and straight up asks how. Frey previously flexed that he just stumbled across them deep in the Hispania Mountains. Wild rumors always claimed the old hero's relics were stashed up there, but literally nobody had ever secured the loot. The main reason was ridiculously simple. Basically, nobody knew the dungeon's exact coordinates. And even if some unlucky soul found it, that absolute raid boss Torkunta was probably camping the front door. Smoothly dodging the real answer, Frey just shrugs and says he was getting totally wrecked and just blindly wandered into an uncharted zone. By sheer dumb luck, he stumbled right into Schweitzer's hidden dungeon. It instantly clicks for Shepard. Those top secret notes Frey bragged about must have been looted from there, too. Coming from that spot, meaning he already had the inside scoop on basically everything that just dropped. Shepard's patience totally wears thin. He grills him for the details, only to get hit with a massive letdown, when Frey just brushes it off as a total fluke. But honestly, those alarm bells are still ringing loud and clear in his head. So he straight up dares Frey to flex the actual power of those Typhoon earrings. Frey casually sets his drink down, and boom. The earrings instantly pulse with this blinding god-tier energy. Flexing complete, he casually asks Shepard for his thoughts. Shepard is just left absolutely speechless. He shuts his eyes, muttering that this isn't exactly the worst-case scenario. Then he drops a massive bomb. There's an even bigger red flag, to be super sus of the kid. Cut to the mansion, it's completely glowing, and the high society banquet is in full swing. VIPs are stuffing their faces and casually spilling tea. Frey rolls up to the scene, rocking a slick black suit. He was honestly hyped to find someone who actually knew about the demigod, was a W, but the reality check was hitting hard. The absolute worst part was finding out that the circles inherited that willpower, only to splinter and wage toxic turf wars against each other. Plus, he still has to dig up dirt on the circle leader, unlock the frozen river's true power, and finally wrap up Schweizer's golem, Anastasia. Frey knows his mental load is totally maxing out right now, and he's probably only flying under the radar right now on pure plot armor. Suddenly a voice snaps him back asking what's cooking in that massive brain of his. Flexing a bright smile, the girl brags that Lilia custom-made her fit. Frey just deadpans, saying it must be an absolute vibe to live with zero thoughts behind those eyes. He scowls, leaving the girl completely clueless about the roast. He stays quiet, takes a sip, and flashes back to that heavy chat with Perrin's dad. Cut to 1 month ago. At the Magic Tower Summit, some insane intel dropped someone actually made contact with the demigod. That instantly locked in Frey's radar. The dude was holding back, sweating over how much tea to spill, but Frey's intense stare demanded answers. So he finally confessed. The traitor Isaka Blake, his own father. Snapping back to the bougie party some random guy is hyping up. Sir Patrick's crazy sword skills, claiming he could go toe-to-toe with Luinoble's top-tier warriors. Turns out it's Goosebar, the try-hard lucky enough to score an invite to the upcoming DRST bash. This dude was a total pawn. Gas him up just a little, and his massive ego did the heavy lifting. Riding on that pure stupidity, Frey bagged his own invite, keeping his master plan, moving flawlessly. Chilling by a table with a frosty drink, Frey scopes out the VIP venue, casually checking out the gorgeous crowd. That is until something totally off script grabs his eye. He locks onto a duo whispering in the corner, and instantly spots a familiar face. Suddenly a sweet voice chimes in, saying she finally tracked him down. Enter Miss Sonia, looking absolute fire, in a pure white gown flanked by Isabel. She starts chatting him up, but Isabel catches a super weird vibe off his face. Pointing dead at Sonia, Frey smirks at Isabel and says that is peak beauty. The two immediately start beefing right in front of the poor girl. Once the drama cools off, Frey turns to Sonia, asking if she actually needed a favor. She just ducks her head, trapping them in the most cringe-worthy silence ever. Breaking the ice, Frey slides her a drink. Right on cue, Goosebar crashes the moment with the smuggest grin imaginable. Frey, he literally has zero idea who this NPC is. He's mentally branding him as just another loudmouth clout chaser, until the guy drops a bombshell calling him the absolute trash of the Blake bloodline. Gaspar flashes a toxic smirk, thirsty for a meltdown. That split second was all it took for Frey to realize he was dealing with an absolute clown. Honestly, Gaspar is totally shook that a massive flop like Frey even sneaked into this elite gala. For a totally irrelevant countryside noble like Gaspar, bagging this VIP invite was practically a life-or-death struggle. This room is the ultimate hub for high-class power plays and dirty secrets. He just keeps yapping, whining about how Frey even scored a spot at the academy, a total flex he could never pull off. But his cocky face completely shatters when Frey just coldly tells him to bounce. Annoyed beyond belief, Frey literally commands the guy to scrub himself from his vision. The girl instantly roasts Frey for using the exact same corny line he swore he'd never drop. Gaspar snaps back totally triggered, calling Frey a delusional psycho, with zero right to disrespect him like that. But mid-rant, his eyes wander over to the two absolute goddesses standing right there. He already knew Perrin threw parties loaded with 10 out of 10s, but these two were on a completely different level. What was totally frying his brain was why they were willingly hanging with a loser like Frey. Frey just leaves him on red. Gaspar instantly assumes he's just faking a Sigma persona in front of the ladies. Out of nowhere, a trio of dudes rolls up, asking if there's any beef. It's Sir Patrick and his two hype men. He slowly checks out the girl, before sliding in smoothly introducing himself to Sonia as Sir Patrick, the wealthy heir to the DRST Empire. Watching this, Gaspar gets insanely salty, realizing Patrick is blatantly hitting on the exact girl he was scheming to bag. The blue-haired beauty drops her name, Sonia Aquarid. That name makes one of the guys visibly jolt. Figuring the foreign girl is out of the loop, he assumes she's clueless about Frey's trash reputation and jumps at the chance to play hero. But Sonia isn't just anybody. She's the eldest daughter of the Aquarid bloodline, holding the heavy title of the Storm. The guy steps up, practically bowing as he apologizes for not realizing she was Lord Anders' rumored fiancée. Sonia immediately shoots that down, flatly stating nothing is official. Brushing her off, he sneers that a loser like Frey Blake doesn't deserve a second of her time. The whole group goes dead silent. Sir Patrick finally pieces it together. This is the infamous Frey, flashing a cocky smirk. He totally name-drops Frey's older brothers, the Magic Tower prodigies, Michelle and Heinz. Hearing that Michelle just became a third-floor master, Frey brutally writes it off as complete garbage. Patrick keeps pressing the issue, rubbing salt in the wound by saying he totally gets why Count Isaac kicked him to the curb. He scoffingly adds that he can't believe the same blood runs in their veins. Absolutely furious, Sonia snaps back to defend Frey. She glares and declares that not a single soul at this banquet even comes close to his level, demanding an immediate apology. The guy instantly refuses, convinced she's pulling some weird prank. He laughs it off, claiming nobody in their right mind would invite such dead weight to an exclusive VIP banquet. His buddies crack up, nodding along. Gaspar jumps on the bandwagon, eating up every single second of the drama. Suddenly, Ander glides up from behind, casually mentioning he must have stepped on some toes. He drops an absolute bombshell. Frey's golden ticket came straight from him. The guys freeze in pure shock. Stepping right up to Sir Patrick, Ander sarcastically apologizes for breaking his heart, smoothly adding that he had no idea he needed the favorite family's permission just to invite his own bros. Then he loudly declares Frey as the absolute VIP of the night. Watching them sweat bullets, he flashes a chilling smile and tells them to chill out and enjoy the party. Gaspar tries to slink into the shadows, but gets totally busted. Ander yanks him back by the collar, whispering darkly that if they weren't at a fancy party right now, he'd already be a goner. Absolutely terrified, the guys scramble away, stuttering out pathetic apologies. Ander and the crew just watch the trash take itself out. Honestly, Frey was way more ruthless than his calm vibe suggested. He and Ander start trading playful jabs about each other's garbage personalities, while the girls just crack up. The lavish banquet hums on around them. Sonia quietly listens in, as Ander calls his friend a total freak of nature. Swirling his drink, Frey zones out. If the world actually knew what went down during that battle, nobody would dare call him the Blake family's reject ever again. But flexing that kind of ego just wasn't his style. Instead, he pivots, asking how Ander's little chat with his dad went. Ander casually drops that his old man suspects Frey is tied to Troman's rings. Silence hangs for a second before Ander raises his glass, bluntly asking if Frey plans to join their secret little club. But tying himself down like that was never part of Frey's master plan. Flashing back to their earlier chat, Frey remembers someone had already verified his identity. When he presses for a name, he's genuinely shell-shocked to hear the name Heinz Blake. His second oldest brother was secretly a circle member too, rolling in the same elite circles as Ander's dad. Even after all the talks, Heinz had actually tried dropping him a breadcrumb. Clearly, he was wired totally differently from Count Isaac and Michelle. Turns out, Heinz only greenlit Frey's brutal exile for a completely hidden motive, but Ander's lips are sealed on the details. Dropping his own bomb, Frey casually announces he's done with the academy. That absolute curveball leaves Isabel speechless. With nothing left to prove, staying was pointless. From across the room, the mysterious girl tracks their conversation. Frey totally catches her staring, but plays it cool. Meanwhile, Isabel is stressing out over his massive choice to drop out. The Duke had basically handed him a golden ticket to join the third Magic Tower, since its legendary library completely wrecked the competition. That's when Frey spots Isabel, completely zoning out, acting super sketchy. As the midnight hours creep in, Isabel wanders the dead silent mansion halls. Reality hits hard. Tomorrow, they go their separate ways. Frey heads off to the tower, and she's stuck going back to school. Ever since finding out he was literally Lucas Troman, she knew this goodbye was inevitable. Yet the anxiety was eating her alive. Without him, she had zero clue what to aim for, or how to even become a powerhouse mage on her own. Totally lost in the sauce, she's spiraling over her next move. Suddenly, a heavy oak door clicks open right in front of her. A familiar voice asks if he's really dipping tomorrow. Frey drops a firm yes, then smoothly thanks his host for the insane banquet and all the top-tier hospitality. He throws in a smirk, admitting that Anders' family name actually pulls some serious heavy-hitting weight. He playfully hypes up his bro, joking that Ander might actually be that once-in-a-century prodigy the Herrera bloodline always brags about. Echoing the wild rumors he's heard, he admits the hype might be 100% real. For the very first time, Ander finally felt the surge of raw mana. At just 5 years old, he swears he isn't flexing, but honestly, Frey is straight up mind blown. I mean, even legendary prodigies like Schweitzer and Frey only awakened their mana at age 7. And by 17, Ander had already even though the official records cap it at 20. That massive gap catches Frey off guard. Finally dropping his walls, Ander confesses something he has kept buried deep inside. His voice completely cracks. He admits his god-tier talent feels way more like a straight-up curse. The two lock eyes in the heavy silence. Frey just watches quietly as Ander drops his gaze to the floor. Choking on his words, he reveals he used to have a mentor, a frail 6th-tier Archmage. The dude was the vice master of the 5th magic tower, basically a walking encyclopedia. Whenever little Ander asked a question, the old man would just hit him with this warm smile and gently pat his head. He craved that validation so bad. He grinded his magic non-stop, just so he could ask more advanced questions. That old man sparked his absolute obsession with mana. Or at least, that is what Ander thought. Raw heartbreak flashes in his eyes. Right after hitting the 4th tier, he asked a question that completely stumped his mentor. The old man violently flinched. Then he totally snapped, screaming that Ander was a total monster. All Ander remembers is that pure, sickening terror on his face. His mentor had watched him level up at a freakish, inhuman speed. And eventually, that fear just boiled over. From that exact moment, Ander completely lost his spark. He still adored magic, but the second he got too deep into it, that horrifying, disgusted face would flash in his mind and paralyze him. Every single day, he despised his own genius. Choking back sobs, he begs to just be normal. An absolute nobody. Just a regular kid learning magic out of pure passion. Maybe then, nobody would look at him like some freak of nature. Frey rests a solid hand on his shaking shoulder, but Ander is completely breaking down, straight up bawling. Frey coldly tells him to drop the dramatic victim act. He orders him to listen up. He says there are certain freaks who transcend the very word genius, beings who stand at the absolute peak of the magic world. And if one pathetic, insecure teacher was enough to break his spirit, he will never even touch that summit. Ander wipes his tears, clinging to every word. Frey drops a heavy promise the next time they cross paths, he will be leagues beyond his current self. So Ander better step his game up too. That brutally honest reality check stuns the boy into silence. Frey pauses, his mind shifting to the demigod, and Frey already strongly suspects that Ander knows this cosmic entity exists. Frey's eyes turn icy. The demigod is a wicked deity, puppeteering all intelligent life, and utterly warping the laws of the universe. But honestly, humanity is also to blame for blindly ignoring the invisible chains choking them. Even so, humanity can still obliterate him and reset this broken world. But only if they absolutely refuse to roll over and die. Frey declares that crushing this false god is a destiny only humans can fulfill. If Ander just wants a cozy, soft life, flexing his magic in some stuffy tower whatever. But Frey's eyes are locked dead on the absolute apex of power, so he can completely slaughter the demigod. He is going to reach the final, impossible tier. Now he glares at Ander. What the hell does he actually want? Ander just sits there frozen in the silence, letting out this long, heavy exhale. Right outside the door, Isabel is eavesdropping through the crack. She had desperately hoped her friend would finally man up and confront his toxic family, so he could carve out his own destiny. In her mind's eye, she envisions these two becoming absolute titans of their era. Frey smacks his shoulder, smirking that he will always be one step ahead. But Ander fires right back with a massive reality check. Next time, he is going to be the one leading the charge. Frey practically beams with pride. Now that is the ultimate mindset of a true comrade. Overwhelmed, Isabel backs away in tears. It was just way too much emotional damage for one night. Fast forward to the next morning. Thick gray clouds blanket the sky. Frey is strapped up and ready to hit the road. The gloomy weather is honestly a huge vibe for a solo journey, but out of nowhere, a voice calls out asking if he is seriously going to ditch his quote-unquote baggage. It's Isabel, lugging this ridiculously massive backpack. He tilts his head, totally confused. What the hell luggage is she talking about? She smirks, reminding him that he literally used to call her dead weight, a total burden, and a massive obstacle. But she has finally made her choice. She is going to push her magic to the absolute limit. And that means trailing behind the greatest mage in history, instead of wasting time with those bozos at the academy. Frey shoots her a hard glare, warning her that she is totally going to regret this. She completely brushes him off, and marches forward, boldly claiming she would follow him straight into the depths of hell. Frey just lets out a soft, genuine smirk, and just like that, the duo calmly sets off on their wild new journey. Not long after, insane rumors start spreading like wildfire about Frey's new inner circle, and when Lord Michel catches wind that these two are way tighter than anyone anticipated, Sir Patrick drops the bombshell that Frey was the absolute VIP of the entire banquet. But Michel barely even blinks. The knight nervously stammers out the details, desperately trying to explain himself. Yet Michel honestly could not care less about his little brother's new squad. He just waves the knight off, kicking him right out of the office. Still, the fact that Perrin actually views Frey as a genuine bestie just doesn't sit right with him. He shoots a glance at Heinz, demanding his take on the situation. Heinz just brushes it off, claiming it's no shocker, considering they survived the exact same academy together. Michel slowly rises from his heavy desk chair, figuring it might actually be worth spilling this intel to their father. He strides right out of the room, leaving Heinz completely in the dust. Heinz just watches him vanish down the hall before staring blankly straight ahead. Gripped tightly in his hand is a bizarre artifact. Frey reveals that Duke Shepard literally handed it over as a strict requirement to even kick off his circle's entrance exam. Isabel is totally convinced that infiltrating this inner circle might honestly be the ultimate cheat code to uncover more about the demigods. Up until recently, Isabel hadn't even caught a single whisper of that terrifying name, nor did she have a single clue about the 5 legendary heroes her friend used to fight side by side with back in the day. History books just hyped them up as some elite grandmasters. Honestly, if Frey hadn't dropped the truth bomb, she'd still be out here believing the demigod was nothing more than some fake bedtime myth. Frey spits straight facts, claiming the most toxic kind of mind control is the invisible one. Anyone caught in that trap literally cannot think for themselves, or even map out their own destiny. They flex fake pride and celebrate hollow wins, basically morphing into brainwashed, happy slaves. And tragically, that is exactly what humanity has turned into right now. Still, he gives her one intense warning. He never actually took an L against the demigods. He has just been grinding on a brutally long side quest, straight to ultimate victory. Before long, a colossal structure looms over them. It is literally Isabel's first time standing this close to a legit magic tower. Frey still has 6 whole months on the clock before he can officially infiltrate the circle. Until that timer runs out, he's got to balance out that frosty, frozen river mana and grind his stats back to his peak, overpowered self. The whole vibe of this place hits him right in the feels with crazy nostalgia, and he casually drops that this very spot is where he first became hopelessly obsessed with mastering magic. Suddenly a squad rolls up on them. The duo instantly clocks their footsteps. They look like sketchy hooded magical entities. The strangers halt right near the newcomers, and plot twist, they are straight up dark elves. Apparently, elves and dwarves now have the absolute green light to roam, completely free across human territory. This catches Frey totally off guard, even though he vaguely remembers skimming a textbook about it back at the academy. Still, compared to 4,000 years ago, this culture shift is a massive mind trip. Back in his prime era, the elves had literally isolated themselves, deep inside the great northern jungle, aggressively claiming it as their exclusive turf. One of the elves catches a weird vibe and locks eyes with Frey. The mage coldly stares right back, but the squad just ghosts past them without dropping a single word. Up close, the magic tower feels obnoxiously massive. Inside, absolute chaos. Warriors are sparring like crazy, while mages aggressively spam their spells. The grand hall is literally overflowing with heavy hitters sweating it out. Isabel drops to her knees, instantly diving into her own brutal workout. She is completely dialed in, totally used to this hardcore battle grind. Suddenly, she catches a blur of lightning-fast, ultra-precise strikes nearby. It is Frey, effortlessly executing some crazy ancient techniques. She literally cannot rip her eyes away from his flawless flow. Street gossip claims he wastes his entire day just doing this goofy dance, and everyone casually writes him off as a total freak. Honestly, at first glance, it definitely looks like a massive joke. But now that Isabel has leveled up her combat IQ, she can literally see the explosive flow of raw ki radiating off his body. An insane amount of lethal strikes are hidden deep within that quote-unquote dance. He throws hands way too fast for a normal human eye to even track, and then he smoothly glides right back to his starting stance, like a slick wave of water. Yeah, this is not some stupid dance at all. It is top-tier god-level martial arts. Just a few feet away, a guy violently slams into the dirt. He taps out immediately, desperately begging his opponent to chill. The winner just coldly towers over his broken body. The elf casually smirks, trashing the human for being pathetically weak. Honestly, talking mad smack after the dude already tapped out is just a super toxic move. A female dark elf violently side-eyes Liamson, mocking him, and asking if beating a scrub really makes him the ultimate badass warrior he pretends to be. Completely embarrassed, Liamson just silently takes the hit to his ego from his master. But as he reaches down to drag his beaten opponent back to his feet, he catches a weird vibe nearby. It is our main guy, still locked completely in the zone, flowing through his bizarre martial arts routine. The elf's eyes instantly glue themselves to him. Isabel suddenly clicks that this is the exact same dark elf who was creeping on them outside the magic tower. He marches right over, demanding to know if Frey is some kind of magic-wielding knight. Frey just gives him a lazy shrug, claiming he is purely a mage. The elf is visibly calling absolute cap on that, because those lethal moves sure do not belong to any basic spellcaster. He glares down at Frey, aggressively spitting the word human at him like a total slur, and Frey just gives him an ice-cold stare, telling the guy to use his actual name. The dark elf finally smirks, dropping his name as Liamson, and right after that, he straight up challenges Frey to a brutal one-on-one brawl. Frey is completely thrown off by the sudden call-out. Liamson quickly backpedals, clarifying he doesn't exactly want a full-blown street fight. The dude just forgot the right word. That is, until his teacher steps in, smoothing things over by calling it what it really is, a formal duel. Cut to the four of them standing dead center in the hall. The elegant elf woman introduces herself as Camilla. She turns to the young girl, asking for her name, apologizing for crashing their conversation, and totally roasting her partner as an annoying bonehead. Suddenly, the two elves break into a rapid-fire argument in Elvish, leaving poor Isabel standing there like a deer in headlights. But Frey, he doesn't even blink. Ice cold, he steps up and declares he's ready to throw down. Liamson's jaw practically drops, a human speaking fluent Elvish. He's absolutely hyped, calling the white-haired boy fascinating. He casually drops that it would be super dope to see an elf master human magic, too honestly sounding exactly like one of his race's ancient elders. Sensing the heavy tension in the air, a massive crowd swarms the area, hungry for a show. The dark elf drops into a fighting stance, shifting his weight with insanely complex, almost alien movements. Boom, he launches himself at Frey, whipping out a vicious left kick. Frey effortlessly blocks it. Totally shocked, Liamson immediately shifts gears, attacking from literally every blind spot at blinding speed. He's using silent shadow steps, vanishing and reappearing with crazy, intricate footwork, but Frey just shuts down every single strike. Switching from defense to offense, Frey flows into a deadly dance-like rhythm. Bam, he floors Liamson with one clean, heavy blow. The dark elf scrambles back to his feet, panting. Watching Frey move, it hits you his fighting style feels way more like an untamed apex predator than a normal human warrior. The hype goes off the charts. They launch themselves into the air, trading bone-crushing blows mid-flight. The crowd is absolutely losing their minds, completely mind-blown that this random white-haired dude is actually going toe-to-toe with Liamson, the literal future leader of the Dark Elves. Frey slices through the air with razor-sharp palm strikes. Liamson counters with a brutal spinning kick. The two titans violently collide in midair, creating a shockwave before slamming back onto the floor, both heavily panting, but refusing to drop their guard. Camilla watches closely, realizing Frey is no basic magic knight. Sure, His super skinny frame might make him look totally harmless. But it makes zero sense how he perfectly deflected that entire barrage. Frustration boiling over, Liamson charges in for a devastating finisher. The clash escalates into a savage, high-speed brawl. Camilla's eyes track every single movement, completely mesmerized by Frey's insanely perfect mana control. Stepping in, she immediately commands them to stand down. Gasping for air, the two warriors actually start hyping each other up. Frey gives credit where it's due, admitting that in an unarmed night brawl, Liamson would totally wipe the floor with him. He also points out that the elf clearly isn't used to gritty, close-quarters combat. Liamson just bursts out laughing, clearly respecting the guy. He asks Frey how long he's crashing at the magic tower. Isabel hands Frey a towel echoing the same question about his stay. Wiping his sweat, Frey casually mentions he's locking in for about 6 months. Liamson lights up at the news, clearly stoked. Meanwhile, Camilla is deeply intrigued by this human. Her eyes lock onto an incredibly potent, magical artifact dangling from his ear. Shaking off her thoughts, she asks the golden question: why choose the third magic tower? Frey explains he's hunting for top-tier texts to craft a highly specific potion. The basic stuff he's read so far, totally useless for what he needs. Whispers ripple through the stunned crowd. Who is this crazy dancing fighter, casually chatting up the elite elf leader? Seeing him hit a dead end, Camilla throws him a lifeline. She offers him access to the vault of Tier 1 magic books, the legendary grimoires. But there's a huge catch. To even touch those first-grade texts, Frey has to pass a hardcore reading exam and secure the absolute approval from 3 different floor masters. Frey doesn't even flinch. He asks for the schedule, only to find out the next exam is literally tomorrow morning. Fast forward to the next day. The Grand Hall is absolutely packed to the brim. All eyes are glued to Frey. The rumors have already spread about how he went blow for blow with an elite dark elf. Plus, the whole room is buzzing with one big question. What the heck is a musclehead magic knight doing taking a scholar's exam? Suddenly, someone gasps loudly, and heads snap toward the entrance. Camilla and Liamson just walked in. Honestly, they were just bored out of their minds, and Liamson was already scheming to drag Frey out for a brutal rematch the second this test was. The massive doors swing open, and the 3 floor masters step into the room. These are the absolute top tiers of the tower. The intimidating guy dead center, that's Michael. Stepping up like an absolute boss, Mikkel kicks off the first trial. The objective? Form a pure, unstable sphere of raw energy. Immediately, the candidates start flexing their magical aura. Phase 2 begins, compress that raw energy. Everyone locks in sweating as they follow the instructions, down to the exact letter. At first glance, this seems like a total cakewalk. But then Master Mikkel pulls a trick from his sleeve, literally. He reveals a tiny, hyper-dense blue sphere. He coldly states that passing requires compressing their energy, until it's physically smaller than his. But crushing raw mana down to the size of a tiny marble, that is insanely, punishingly difficult. The clock is ticking. One by one, candidates crack under the pressure and get eliminated. One dude is practically bursting a blood vessel trying to shrink his sphere, but he fizzles out just like the rest of them. The target was just way too small to hit. Even Isabel is clenching her teeth, pouring absolutely everything she has into the trial, nailing the exact dimensions. Master Michael announces she passed the test. Completely drained, she finally lets her magic fade out. Right after that, Michael locks eyes with someone else. Their sphere is shrunk down to the absolute limit. The Dark Elves do not even need to flex anymore. They get instant VIP access to the ancient grimoires. Then some random guy calls out Frey, assuming he straight up quit. But when Frey speaks up to Master Michael, the examiner is absolutely speechless. Your eyes can play tricks on you, but real mana has to be felt. Frey deadass compressed his sphere so hard, it vanished from sight. Michael is mind-blown by this god-tier control. Spotting his earring, he tells Frey to just skip the rest of the exams entirely. The boy formally introduces himself as Frey Blake, third son of the Blake bloodline. Michael instantly demands a one-on-one private chat. Soon they are posted up in a massive, brightly lit room. Michael praises his insane skills. Once he hears that Duke Shepard personally backed him, he cuts straight to the chase. Michael already knows he hit the 5th stage. Honestly, Frey is gunning for the 7th stage, but he keeps that flex completely to himself. Staring out the window, Michael asks if he knows anything about the demigod. Frey hints that he knows a little bit, Michael drops a bombshell, saying they just found traces of the demigod in Utiano, along with terrifying signs of apostles. These guys were handpicked by the demigod, injected with crazy divine powers, and boldly called themselves apostles. Now crazy cultists from all over the world are grouping up to head straight there. Frey is completely shook since this kind of madness did not even exist 4,000 years ago. Utiano is actually controlled by Master Michael and some guy named Honor Lux. At this rate, entire cities and villages could get wiped off the map soon, so they urgently need to investigate. Michael asks Frey to team up with them, and he instantly says yes. Michael finds that lightning-fast response a bit weird, but also super interesting. It is a highly deadly mission, so a normal kid probably should have taken more time to think about it. Frey just wants to know why he got drafted for this. Michael slowly rolls up his sleeve and flashes an ancient relic of Iris, revealing it is a piece of the Fistfounder bracelets. After the Circle Master of the Trauman Rings was brutally murdered by the demigod, everything descended into pure chaos. The Dark Elves hanging out in the tower were actually backup from the Blacktooth, which is exactly why Michael recognized him. A kid rocking typhoon earrings was ridiculously hard to ignore. Touching them, Frey realizes his old gear somehow became famous over time. After a solid prep phase, he fully managed to stabilize the crazy energy of the frozen river. Then Michael asks why he is so desperate to read the magic grimoires. Frey casually drops that he wants to craft an elixir, which means he needs to study up on alchemy. The old man is totally impressed and tells him books are not what he needs. Instead, he should hit up a certain woman. Completely confused, Frey follows the lead anyway, knocks on a random door, and waits. When the girl finally pops out, he introduces himself and mentions that Lord Michael sent him. Turns out this is Professor Adelia, an absolute prodigy from West Road Academy. Stepping inside, Frey instantly notices her lifestyle is completely chaotic and extreme. Slouching in her chair, she tells him to grab a seat wherever. As he glances around at the massive pile of study tools, she looks absolutely exhausted and overworked, demanding he explain exactly what he wants, in exactly 5 words. Frey locks and turns to her and boldly states he needs a mana potion, leaving her totally impressed by his lightning-fast comeback. Now wildly curious about what kind of potion it is, he just casually hands her a vial. She analyzes it on the spot. The mana packed inside is ridiculously dense. Frey starts breaking it down, but cuts himself off halfway. Super annoyed, the professor tells him to use more words this time. He drops a bombshell, revealing it is the literal heart of a 1,000-year-old dragon, packing around 100,000 mana, and he wants to forge it into an elixir. It sounds like pure madness, but her eyes instantly light up. She warns him the crafting method is brutal, because for the ingredients, he will need something practically impossible to track down a literal phoenix feather. Without hesitating, Frey slaps one right onto her desk and asks if she needs anything else. Completely shook, she admits this is her first time ever seeing one. Then she challenges him to compress an energy sphere down to the size of a grape. Frey effortlessly pulls it off, instantly shrinking the sphere, and shortly after, the chaotic duo kicks off their hardcore experiments. Adelia starts wondering who the heck this new partner actually is. She guesses he belongs to the Blake bloodline. She does not recognize the name Frey, but she definitely knows his older brothers. Even if some of his textbook knowledge is insanely outdated, his raw mastery over alchemy and god-tier mana control is mind-blowing, with broken skills, exactly like that she cannot believe she has never heard of him. Suddenly, Adelia aggressively grabs him by the shirt collar, looking like she is about to confess an absolute murder, but instead, she pathetically begs him to be her personal assistant. She even tries to bait him with a massive paycheck, but he instantly curves her, so she scrambles and promises to teach him highly classified crafting methods that literally nobody else knows. She immediately starts plotting fresh ways to completely win him over. Sprawled out on the floor, her brain suddenly short-circuits over one massive question. She just can't wrap her head around why he still insists on calling her teacher.